081 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Last week, Christie's Auction House in New York announced that it was holding an auction devoted solely to art created with artificial intelligence. Nearly 6,000 people have signed an open letter calling on Christie's to cancel the sale over concerns that the technology behind such AI art pieces exploits human artists and can potentially violate their copyright. And there are broader ethical questions at play too. Where do the boundaries of art lie? With me now is James Thomas from Martin Stanmore Auctions. James, very good to see you indeed. I don't quite see how you can have art without a human being. I mean, art to me is something which is produced by a human being which expresses something about the human condition. To me, that cannot be produced by a machine. How do you react to that?
I agree completely with what you're saying there. I think for us at Martin Stanmore, we're very much about sort of getting behind artists in a traditional method.
I sometimes say to my team, I've got a piece to camera to do now. Find out what AI would say that I would say. And, of course, what it comes up with. It doesn't have enough knowledge about what I've just experienced, so it's not a perfect example. But it certainly gets the tone. And, therefore, I mean, I'm completely replaceable. I mean, the next series that I do...
Say that.
Well, thank you so much. The next series I do of Railway Judges, you could perfectly well have an avatar and AI producing words that sound like mine.
It is very scary. It is very scary. And I think for collectors and investors, it's a bit scary for them too. I mean, a lot of our collectors at Martin Stanmore that we speak to, they very much prefer things that come from traditional artists, not just sort of blue chip works, but also up and coming artists.
GB News, the People's Channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. Of course, we're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, has the Prime Minister finally read the room?
We will cut our spending on development assistance, moving from 0.5% of GNI today to 0.3% in 2027.
Yes, today, Sir Keir Starmer committed to increasing defence spending to 2.5% by 2027. Now, to pay for it, he pledged to make the difficult choice to cut foreign aid. Is this common sense policy a bid to muzzle reform? And might Donald Trump demand Britain pays 5% later this week anyway? Now, despite Reform UK being met by masked Antifa thugs in Cornwall last night, as you can see on your screen, look at the state of them. A new poll has declared that Nigel Farage is Britain's most popular political leader, with the Prime Minister's popularity falling faster than a Mike Amesbury constituent. I'll be joined in the studio by the Red Wall Rottweiler, and that, of course, is Lee Anderson. And a granny from Stockport had two Thoughts police officers bang on her front door after a complaint about a private Facebook post where she demanded that a Labour councillor resigned. Well, on today's show, I'll be joined by that granny, Helen Joyce, who calls this a chilling clampdown on free speech. And the Environment Secretary, Steve Reid, was today heckled, as you can see on your screen, by protesters as they took to the stage at the National Farmers Union. Mr Reid said sorry to British farmers, but he's dug in on Labour's inheritance tax raid. On today's show, I'll be joined by a farmer who says it's time to up the ante. And that's all coming up in your next hour. So today, Sir Keir Starmer appeared to wear the clothes of Nigel Farage. In fact, he directly replicated some Reform UK policies, as I'll set out during the show. Increase in defence, 2.5% by year 3, then 3% within 6 years. That's exactly the same as the reform policy to increase spending to 2.5% by 2027 and then 3%, and also pledging to more or less halve foreign aid. That, again, is the same policy as reform. Now, they say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but is this, right-wing? Is it far-right? Is it dangerous? Well, suddenly, Keir Starmer is wearing the clothes of Nigel Farage. Will it be enough to convince you to vote for the Labour Party? Let me know, gbnews.com/your say. But now here's your headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 3 o'clock. These are your headlines. Sir Keir Starmer has announced a major plan to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027, calling it the biggest sustained increase since the Cold War. But to fund it, the aid budget will be slashed from 0.5% to 0.3% of national income, sparking backlash from charities who warn of devastating consequences. The Institute for Fiscal Studies disputes Starmer's claim that defence will rise by £13.4 million a year, saying the truthful increase is closer to £6 billion. The IFS is warning that if defence spending goes beyond 2.5%, further cuts or tax rises may be needed. The Prime Minister says the move is needed to counter Vladimir Putin and uncertainty over US support ahead of talks with Donald Trump this week.
Starting today, I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027. Yeah. And we will maintain that for the rest of this Parliament.
Now, energy bills are set to rise again, with Ofgem confirming a higher-than-expected increase of more than £100 a year from April. The 2.4% hike will push annual bills for a typical household to £1,849, affecting 22 million homes across England, Scotland and Wales. The regulator says rising wholesale costs are to blame and suggests customers consider fixing tariffs, but prices could fall again in July. Standing charges are also going up for gas and consumer groups, and they warn the increase will hit struggling families the hardest. Meanwhile, the government says it is extending aid, with nearly 3 million more households set to get help with their energy bills next winter under new government plans. The proposals would expand the warm home discount, offering £150 to 2.7 million extra homes, including nearly 1 million with children. The government says the plans will ease the impact of gas price spikes and is also working with Ofgem on a potential debt relief scheme. Energy Secretary Ed Miliband says expanding the discount will help protect millions of families from rising costs. However, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, told us vulnerable households can't afford to wait until next winter.
The government should scrap the energy price bill increase for the almost 10 million pensioners who have had their winter fuel payments taken away. We know from our own research that 9 in 10 people who are worried about energy bills have already changed their behaviour to try and keep their heating costs down. And now people are choosing between heating and eating. So we want the government to take action not next winter, but right now.
In other news, members of an organised criminal gang have been convicted of forcing migrants into working in cannabis farms across England. The gang smuggled dozens of Vietnamese nationals into the UK on small boats and in the backs of lorries. The migrants were then made to work on illegal drugs farms in often squalid conditions to pay off their debts to the smuggling gangs. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has the details.
On a residential street in Hartlepool, police forced their way into a suspected cannabis farm.
I know you don't fully understand me, but we'll get a translator as soon as possible, OK?
Arresting a Vietnamese man looking after this criminal enterprise. Within seconds, officers find the first room with dozens of immature plants.
Wow.
Right next door, another room stuffed full of plants. The stench of cannabis is overwhelming.
Oh, wow.
This is just one of dozens of cannabis farms in the West Midlands, Derbyshire, Cheshire, Teesside and London that National Crime Agency investigators identified as they smashed a criminal racket of enforced labour.
Listen to me. At this time, you are under arrest for cultivation of cannabis.
This is one of those gang members, Tazwar Hussain, outside a cannabis farm in East London. 4 Vietnamese nationals were found inside. Like so many others, they'd been smuggled into the UK and forced to pay off their debt to the traffickers by working in the farms for little to no money. The 6 members of this gang, who exploited and threatened dozens of migrants to work for them, will be sentenced in July. Mark White, GB News.
And the BBC has issued a public apology after a review revealed missed opportunities to address concerns over former Radio 1 DJ Tim Westwood's conduct. While the report found no widespread knowledge of serious allegations, the broadcaster admits it fell short of its values, apologising to those affected and promising changes to prevent future failures. Westwood, who strongly denies all allegations, was accused of creating a toxic work environment during his time at the BBC. The £3.3 million review also outlines steps the BBC has already taken to tackle bullying and harassment. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now let's crack on with the show because Sir Keir Starmer is to cut the UK's foreign aid budget in order to boost defence spending by 2.5% of GDP by 2027. Now, the Prime Minister said the government will deliver the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War era, but it can only be funded by diverting resources from elsewhere. And let's remind you of the moment of that announcement earlier today.
We will cut our spending on development assistance, moving from 0.5% of GNI today to 0.3% in 2027.
Well, let's speak now with GB News political editor Christopher Hope. Chris, welcome to the show. So a lot of people are saying this is a whiff of common sense, the kind of policy that might tempt the red wall voters to vote for the Labour Party, except, Chris Hope, they bear more than a passing similarity to the exact same announcements made by the Reform Party last year. Tell us more.
That's right. I've been looking into the archives of Reform UK, such as they are, for a young party, and it does turn out that this party did recommend back in July's election last year that they would be increasing defence spending by year 3 of a Reform government, that's 2027, from to 2.5% from around the figure today, maybe 2.3%, and then 3% by 2030. Lo and behold, what does Keir Starmer do today? He says he'll increase defence spending to 2.5% by 2027 and 3% by 2035. So quite similar, it looks like. Also, in the same Reform UK manifesto, they said they would look to halve the aid budget from put to around 0.25% of GDP. The Labour government has gone from 0.5 to 0.3% of GNI. That's gross national income. So lots of similarities, and to me that shows this Prime Minister is willing to take the tough choices, which mean that he can deliver on the defence of this country. He came into power, Martin, didn't he, saying he was country before party. Well, here is a case in point. He is taking ploughshares and turning them into weapons, because that's what we need to do, with the US getting more and more remote from the UK, from Europe in terms of protecting and guaranteeing our security. The UK is stepping up. It's a very, very tough choice for him. The left of our political life is not very happy with this at all. He said it's been a very difficult decision to take on aid, the PM says today, but it remains a cut, and I won't pretend otherwise. He calls it the biggest sustained increase in spending since the end of the Cold War back in the early 1990s, because no one wants the bloodshed to continue. The national posture, our posture as a country, is changing, and that's why they put up defence spending at the expense of aid.
But Chris Hope, at the weekend, Sir Keir Starmer called Reform dangerous. They called them right-wing, and now they're lifting their policies wholesale. Does that make Sir Keir Starmer's foreign aid policy dangerous or right-wing? Does it make his defence policy dangerous or right-wing?
Well, I think, he's taking a view of all of reform. I think there's been remarks made in the past by Nigel Farage about Putin that I think he may disavow now, saying he admired him as a strong leader. That was a decade ago, of course, by Farage. But the left see these remarks and they think that equates to the whole modern-day Reform UK party. But he clearly is seeing here there's elements of what... I should say, by the way, Robert Jenrick also urged to cut the aid budget and spend it on defence when he was running to be Tory leader. Others have said this on the right of politics. But it is, it's no question, it's a response, I think, to the pressure from reform, the way it's doing so well in the polls, and his response here, this government willing to take, I would argue they are very difficult choices for a left-wing Labour government to take, to cut the aid budget and spend it on defence, but frankly, we all need to be kept safe. I should say on that the issue of how much is being raised in 2027, it's quite interesting, 13.4 billion more. So you get there, as I understand it, from going up by 0.2% in the aid budget, it will cost 6.1 billion, and the balance should come from the growing economy. So they'll get there eventually. Of course, there's lots of ifs and buts with the state of the UK economy, but you have to give credit, I think, to the Labour government. They are literally putting the country before party. It's difficult for the left-wing government, but they're doing it.
Chris, what if that growth doesn't happen? Let's face it, there's been no growth thus far. We're going to be looking, are we not, to some kind of fiscal event, tax rises, more cuts in March or April potentially. We haven't got a magic money train anymore. Jeremy Corbyn burnt that to the ground. If we don't get growth, there will have to be tax raises.
Or cuts in the welfare budget, or if they can't cut the NHS budget, given they're boosting it by 22 billion or so after that budget back in October. We are told there'll be no more tax-raising budgets like last October in one breath, and the second breath we hear from the Chancellor they can't write 4 or 5 years worth of budgets this year. So yeah, I think there could be more spending, whether the borrowing goes up, but again there's now a fiscal rule much tighter than the Tories had, so it will be a very tight spending round, and we're expecting to get an OBR update later next month. And of course there's a spending review on defence coming from Lord Robertson, George Robertson, a former head of NATO. It won't be easy, but I guess if the economy shrunk, then all budgets are cut or hit by that, not least the aid budget as much as the defence budget. So of course it's hoping, as we all hope, the economy will grow and these numbers can bear fruit.
And Chris Hope, perhaps some of the policies are being borrowed from reform, because a favourability of political leaders poll out today showing that Nigel Farage is the most popular political leader, although it has to be said, not many of them are particularly popular at all.
Well, that's right. I think if Nigel Farage is popular, if you've been critical of Farage, he's never been in power. He has 5 MPs against the Tories' 121. Labour far more. Labour's majority is a huge majority in the House of Commons. So he can offer up maybe simpler solutions to difficult issues, which those in government say, well, life isn't that straightforward. Towing away migrant boats with the Royal Navy, that could be really risky to the migrants, and whether that's allowed under the international law of the sea is disputed. But I think Farage is setting the weather for politics. Now, Number 10 would obviously completely disavow any suggestion they're copying what Farage says or has been doing, but I think you can look at what's happening here. These work policies reform were pushing forward back in July, and the government's going there, but it may work for them in the polls, Martin. This could be something which could see the polls tick up. I also do think, by the way, that in an increasingly unsafe world, it might make people longer term be less willing to take a risk on an untried party like Reform UK, with just 5 MPs against many more for the Tory party and Labour. So lots to play for, and we're only 8 months into this new government.
Although don't forget, of course, Donald Trump could throw everything in the air by demanding 5% of GDP later this week. Well, all to play for when Keir Starmer goes to DC.
Absolutely, and I'll be on the plane with him and bring the news to you. Elsewhere in government today, the government has announced plans to go through who has these government credit cards, these expense accounts, these government procurement cards, they're called, and take action if any fraud has been committed, and to go line by line analysis of government spending. I think the influence of Trump, more than possibly Farage, is being felt in UK politics here, both with defence spending and also this idea of this DOGE, this Department of Government Efficiency in the States. We have a department of getting best value out of the taxpayer set up by this government. I think what the influence of Trump is being felt perhaps a bit more than Farage in UK politics right now.
Chris Hope. Politics, what a funny old game. The Labour Party in one day copying Nigel Farage and Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Chris Hope, always a pleasure to have you on the show, and I'll see you back in the studio in an hour's time, my friend. Thank you very, very much. Now, another bitter blow to Brits today as energy bills are set to rise yet again, by this time by £111 a year from April. Now, during the general election campaign, the Energy Secretary, that man Ed Miliband, well, he repeatedly promised that his policies would save families a whopping £300 on their energy bills.
Only Labour offers a plan for real change to cut energy bills for good with GB Energy, our new publicly owned energy company.
A bit of jackanory there, because since he took office, there have been not one, not two, but three energy price rises. Well, let's now go to Manchester and speak to GB News' North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper. Sophie, we were promised £300 reductions in our bills. We've had three increases, £111 per year. People not at all happy about it.
They absolutely are not, Martin. We've been here in South Manchester all day today speaking to a variety of people who are going to be affected across the board by energy bills continuing to rise. You said it there, £111 for the average household every single year. That is an increase of 6.4% higher than the forecasted 5%. Now, today, as I say, we've been here in South Manchester. We've been speaking to people across the border, the People's Channel. We've been speaking to the people. Earlier in Good Afternoon Britain, we spoke to the operations manager of a pizza restaurant on one of the high streets. He was talking to us about how their bills have gone through the roof and how they're trying to manage the cost of all that alongside the cost of staffing, the cost of food, so many things that they're having to consider. We also spoke to a landlord and her tenants. They spoke to us about the balancing acts that they're having to try and strike, given the rising costs that both of them are facing. The landlord even telling us her bills, her gas and electricity bills, have quadrupled in the last year. That's something that she's having to deal with, whilst also trying to be fair to her tenants. We also, this morning, we were on this very street, Martin, speaking to one local resident, Mo Riaz, who lives in this house here behind me. He was talking to me about how worried he is about being able to manage these rising costs. This is what he had to say.
Last year the government was helping us. This year we're getting no help. You know, I'm on direct debits paying for my gas and electric bills, both going to British Gas. And it's gone up from £110 a month to £167 a month. And what you're saying now, it's going to be even more. I don't know how we're going to cope, to be frank.
Now, I assume by you said that you were getting help last year, but you're not getting this year. Yeah. You mean the winter fuel allowance.
That's right.
Have you had yours cut?
Well, we haven't had any this year, Sophie. Nothing at all this year. I mean, as you can see, you know, when you look around the flat, you know, we've got blankets and stuff like that. I've got that kind of a space age blanket thing to stop the heat going out of this room. It's really hard to heat this room up.
And I think Mo's story there is something that will resonate with so many of our viewers. 26 million households affected by that rising cost in April. So many people will have to make decisions about their budgeting, about how they're staying warm. And it is something that is going to be worrying millions and millions of people all around the UK, Martin.
So, Reaper there, live from Manchester. We were promised the world with net zero. Was it just a load of old hot air? So, Reaper, always a pleasure. Thank you, and speak to you again in the next hour. Now, we're giving you two chances to win in our latest Great British giveaway. Not one, but two, as we have two amazing prize bundles to be won. Here's all the details that you need to enter.
Don't miss your chance to be one of two big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have two prize bundles that have to be won. There's two lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, coming up, Steve Reed, the Environment Secretary, was early today heckled on stage by angry farmers at the National Farmers Union conference. Mr. Reed says sorry to those British farmers, but he's dug in on Labour's inheritance tax rate. And next, I'll be joined by a farmer who was there, and he says, I reckon it's time to up the ante. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, good mate, time is 3:26 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the farmers' fury at the National Farmers Union conference earlier on today, as the Environment Secretary, the beleaguered Steve Reed's keynote speech, as you can see on screen, was interrupted by farmers protesting, urging the government to reset its relationship with farmers. Now, this comes, of course, after months of backlash over Labour's inheritance tax raid, and the NFU president, Tom Bradshaw, has called out the government for breaking promises with its morally wrong policy. But will they change tack? Will anything happen? Well, I'm joined now in the studio by farmer Martin Williams. Martin, welcome to the show. I've got to say, this is starting to feel like Groundhog Day. Farmers are saying we will never stop. Tom Bradshaw saying this policy is morally wrong. Twice today, Steve Reed apologised to farmers who protested. He was heckled, but he left the building. Has anything changed?
Nothing has changed from where we are today, and it's very unfortunate that Steve sat there like a puppet, really, for the Treasury, and unfortunately unable to say what we need to hear. And it's pretty obvious that might need a change at the top, by the seems of it, to get anything done with this situation. It's unfortunate for him. He seems to be being played by all sides, doesn't he? And from an NFU perspective, you know, what's the point of talking to him about inheritance tax when he has no power? He's absolutely nowhere in the game. It's disappointing for a minister, really. He's the minister for a sector, and he's not representing that sector. And that seems to be a shame.
Got to say, Martin, when those protesters, as we can see on our screen now, are holding up their banners, and even a couple of pencil-neck vegans made it onto the stage. I mean, how do they get that? There's a ring of steel around the entire building. It's like the Berlin Wall out there.
It's amazing how...
Two vegans got on the stage.
It's amazing how slim a gap they can get through. But some of the banner in the room, I mean, one of the banners was protesting about the fact that Keir Starmer last year at the conference had made these pledges that family farms are more important, and once they're gone, they're gone. And here we are 1 year later on a stage where those banners are being held up to embarrass them.
And we can see on screen there a couple of turnip heads, a couple of vegans. They've literally got turnips on their heads, saying "Root for the planet, go vegan." Of course, they didn't even make it to the second course.
I think they were supposed to be from Oxford, weren't they? Which is, I think William Hague is now the Chancellor of Oxford. I wonder what he felt about them protesting about anti-farming.
Now, we've got to say, though, Martin, of course the government will say it had to make some tough decisions, it has to raise some money. But are you convinced that the government's figures add up?
No, they don't. They've improved that. I mean, Jeremy Moody is the Google of figures when it comes to agricultural valuations and agricultural matters, and he is provided figures that show they will not add up. They do not match. And until they come to the table and realise they're hiding behind false claims. And it just seems to be a spiteful government now rather than someone that's basing anything on facts. They're not using facts, they're just using spite. And that seems disappointing.
Is anything going to change? We've had another conference, there's been another terse exchange of words, There's been another protest outside today. On my way in, I saw a whole bank of tractors and they were banging out their horns, blaring away during Steve Reed's speech. You could hear them inside. Again, we've been here before. What's going to happen next? Now, I know I've asked you this repeated times. Anybody who comes in the studio representing the farming community, I say, what next? Because they're not listening to Queensberry rules. Are you at a stage, Martin, where you feel you might need to go like happened in the year 2000 when fuel depots were blockaded, farmers joined up with hauliers and forced even the mighty Tony Blair, surging in popularity levels that Keir Starmer could only dream of, force him into a U-turn? Are we getting there yet?
Well, we're getting towards it, and you can see the passion that's displayed by the people that are protesting, whether it be in Milton Keynes or today outside the QE building. There are people out there that are very, very, very cross by this, and for a government to just close its ears as if they don't want to listen, and for an industry to be ignored is at their peril, to be quite honest. It just seems so short-sighted for them to take this stance.
What was very moving about what Tom Bradshaw did say earlier on, though, he said he's had hundreds of messages, desperate messages, he said, taken hundreds of panicked calls from farmers, really, really worried and scared about their inheritance situation. What kind of stories are you hearing, Martin Williams, from farmers who are staring down the barrel, perhaps, of multi-generational farms simply being broken up?
It's across the board. I mean, the average sort of bill we're looking at, 600,000, I would say. There are very, very desperate stories. People don't die in the right order. And within this government's policy, they're assuming that the farmer's wife has no income. They're assuming that the farmer's wife is sitting there like some little lady that doesn't earn anything of her own. They're assuming that everyone dies in the right order. It's an absolute abhorrent policy that it just doesn't make sense in any way, shape or form. And it doesn't add up on the numbers. It doesn't add up in They started off saying it was Jeremy Clarkson's fault and it was Dyson's fault. Those tax breaks are still there.
Yeah.
They haven't managed to alter that. So it's nothing to do with Jeremy Clarkson. It's nothing to do with Dyson. It's nothing to do with anything other than spite. And spite is a very difficult thing to change, isn't it?
Okay, Martin Williams, thanks as ever for coming in to see us. If you're around later on, I'll join you for a beer after. Definitely. Thank you very, very much. Always a pleasure. Martin Williams, thanks for joining me here on the show. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including concerns from locals about the expansion of the Manston Asylum Processing Centre. I'll be speaking with a concerned Kent-based councillor. That's next. But first, here's your headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Your headlines at 3:31. Sir Keir Starmer has announced a major plan to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP from 2027, calling it the biggest sustained increase since the Cold War. But to fund it, the aid budget will be slashed from 0.5% to 0.3% of national income, sparking backlash from charities who warn of devastating consequences. The Institute for Fiscal Studies disputes Starmer's claim that defence will rise by £13.4 million a year, saying the true increase is closer to £6 billion. The IFS is warning that if defence spending goes beyond 2.5%, further cuts or tax rises may be needed. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says the move is needed to counter Vladimir Putin and uncertainty over US support ahead of talks with Donald Trump this week.
Starting today, I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027. Yeah. And we will maintain that for the rest of this Parliament.
Now, energy bills are set to rise again, with Ofgem confirming a higher-than-expected increase of more than £100 a year from April. The 2.4% hike will push annual bills for a typical household to £1,849, affecting 22 million homes across England, Scotland and Wales. The regulator says rising wholesale costs are to blame and suggests customers consider fixing tariffs, but prices could fall again by July. Standing charges are also going up for gas, and consumer groups warn the increase will hit struggling families the hardest. In other news, former Archbishop of Canterbury, George Carey, is facing potential disciplinary action after a scathing abuse report rocked the Church of England. The Macon Review revealed that church leaders, including Carey, failed to act on decades of abuse by Christian camp leader John Smythe, despite being aware of it. Carey, who resigned as a priest in December over a separate case, is one of 10 clergy named in the report, now under investigation. The Church's national safeguarding team is seeking to bring proceedings, even though the 12-month time limit for such cases has passed. The Church has issued a heartfelt apology to victims, with survivors' lifelong suffering at the heart of their response. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2664 and €1.2055. The price of gold is £2,306 and 32 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,680 points.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Warwickshire, the M6 southbound is partly blocked after a collision. It's happened between Junction 3 for Nuneaton and Junction 2 for Coventry and the M69. In Berkshire, the M4 westbound is partly blocked after a breakdown. That's just before Junction 10 for Wokingham and Bracknell. In Surrey, the M23 northbound is partly blocked by a breakdown as well. That's between Gatwick Airport at junction 9 and junction 8 for the M25. In Worcestershire, the M5 northbound is queuing after a collision involving a lorry and a car between junction 6 at Worcester and 5 at Droitwich. And in Devon at South Brent, the A38 is partly blocked eastbound after a collision just near the Rattery turnoff.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Newly released MI5 files reveal that Queen Elizabeth II was kept in the dark over the treachery of a senior courtier.
Yeah, for almost a decade. This is Sir Anthony Blunt, who played a double life, passing intelligence, the KGB, during World War II as a senior MI5 officer. But, remarkably, he was allowed to keep his position amid fears of a major scandal if the truth came out.
Well, now those files have been released by the National Archives, which includes the Queen's response to finding out a trusted member like Anthony Blunt was really a traitor.
Well, joining us now in the studio is GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Good to see you this morning, Cameron. This is astonishing.
Oh, absolutely. And this wasn't a little spy. This was Anthony Blunt was a full-blown spy. He passed to the Soviets the D-Day deception plans during the Second World War. He was working for MI5, but a double agent for the KGB as well.
The wrong plans.
He passed on the plans.
The wrong ones.
The wrong one in 1944. Yeah. Exactly. But he then got a job inside Buckingham Palace as one of the Queen's most trusted aides and courtiers, the surveyor of her art, essentially like kind of an art advisor for her late Majesty. There was always suspicions about Anthony Blunt way back in the early 50s because he was part of this notorious Cambridge spy ring, a group of 5 boys recruited at Cambridge. 2 of these people fled to Moscow in 1951. Anthony stayed behind in London and subsequently got a job inside Buckingham Palace. And it wasn't until 1964 that he confessed to his treachery. The reason he confessed was because he was granted immunity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:39 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Residents of a small village in Kent are speaking out after plans for the expansion of an asylum seeker processing centre became shrouded in secrecy. Well, villagers say the new 93-acre site in Manston is being forced upon them, with many fearing the £700 million refurbishment could be used to house illegal Channel migrants. Well, we can now speak with the Conservative councillor at Thanet District Council, and that's Mark Rattigan. Mark, welcome to the show. An astonishing story, one that seems to replicate what happened at RAF Scampton in Lincolnshire. Of course, the site there of the historic Dam Busters. The Manston RAF complex itself formed a pivotal role in the Battle of Britain, and now suddenly it's being repurposed, could be filled with asylum seekers, and as usual, the local people do absolutely nothing about it. Tell us more.
It's not just the local people, the local council. We're given very little information. The Home Office is basically a power to itself. We're getting very little information on how many people have been held there, what's actually going on there, and that obviously reflects down to local residents. Local residents are worried, who is being put on their doorsteps, because there's been instances where refugees have escaped from the provision they've got there. We were told it was a temporary provision there, and all of a sudden that's backtracked now and is now looking to become a permanent place.
And Mark, it's just on the Isle of Thanet there, of course, just down the coast from Dover, the main landing point. So this could be a very, very busy processing centre. There could be thousands and thousands of military-aged men going through there. You've been given no guarantees on security, no guarantees on containment, and you're a small town, right? Like 1,900 people live in the area, and people have every right to be concerned. What kind of feedback are you getting when you raise this, for example, with the Home Office?
I mean, there's basically the response is basically they can do as they please. People are generally concerned. Why, we've got compassion for any immigrants. A lot of people are voicing that these immigrants that seem to be coming over, they're not women and children. These are grown men, and we're in a very poor area. And there's been pictures going around on social media of the meals and that they're serving at the immigration centre, and these meals are like five-star meals. And as you can imagine, it gets the back of people up because we are in a very deprived area where people struggle with food banks. You can't get doctor appointments, and suddenly now the government wants to spend X amount of millions, with no improvement to the infrastructure in the local area.
And Mark, wouldn't it be wonderful if £700 million was spent on an area like yours for regeneration, for giving people jobs, for giving people new doctor surgeries, new dentists? You would welcome that money being spent in a way that was beneficial to the community. But I'm assuming when you're speaking to your constituents there and Thanet District Council, they're very, very concerned that this isn't beneficial to them. In fact, it could be a net drain on things like doctor surgeries, schools, dental appointments, the usual stuff.
I think it's, as I said, it's a huge concern because, as you say, in the local area, doctors, there's huge amount of investment that's needed, and rather than investing in our area for our local people, and like the old saying goes, charity begins at home. We should be looking after the people at home, making sure, I mean, myself, to get a doctor's appointment, you can look at 3-4 weeks. And that's what gets onto people. It's not about these poor people need places to go, but we shouldn't have to suffer, with our services. The government should be putting it into our infrastructure first, and these centres are after.
And Mark, as in so many other processing centres like this across Britain, people have concerns about safety, particularly young people, particularly women. Now, nobody is saying that everybody who goes to these places is about to commit a crime, but if you had thousands of people from anywhere across the country of any nationality coming into a small community, people have justifiable concerns, don't they?
Exactly. This is not about race or who people are. This is about not knowing who is on our doorstep. And as I said before, there was an instance where people actually did break out the immigration centre. We don't know where, what history they have or what, attacks. And people are generally scared. People, are scared of the situation. They're scared of who are on their doorsteps. There needs to be more communication, because what is actually going to, what security is there, what they're going to put in place there to protect the local people.
OK, well, thank you for joining us today. That's Mark Rattigan, Conservative Councillor at the Thanet District Council. Thank you for sticking up for your constituents and speaking to us today here on GB News. Now, in response to these claims, a Home Office spokesperson has told GB News this. We began community engagement work last year on the infrastructure upgrade needed at the Manston site. Our top priority remains protecting the security of the local community, and consulting them on the upgrade plans will, of course, be part of that. The government is committed to smashing the criminal gangs responsible for the cross-channel smuggling trade and reducing the need for the Manston processing facilities as a result. Now, moving on, if you're in search of some winter sun this year, and who can blame you, then here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're heading away for some winter sun through this week, there will be some fine weather around across parts of the Mediterranean, but currently around the eastern Med it's still fairly unsettled. Some heavy rain, some strong winds and temperatures well below average for the time of year, but these are gradually going to be lifting. Further west, a drier story across many parts of, well, France and Spain, but there is some wet weather starting to push its way in as we go later on this week. Otherwise, some decent sunshine on offer. See you later.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Eventually we'll see daytime showers easing overnight, but that means clear skies, so turning chilly. We're likely to see a frost, but a different story in the west, turning wet and windy as this next frontal system starts to push its way eastwards, and we will start to see some showers continue for a time, particularly across the far northwest, where once again the odd shower may be heavy, but elsewhere these largely easing away, leaving a dry night. But that means plenty of clear skies, particularly across eastern areas. Those temperatures soon dipping away and likely to see a frost, particularly across the northeast of Scotland, but turning very wet and windy across parts of Northern Ireland, Wales, parts of Devon and Cornwall. We could actually see some quite heavy downpours by the time we reach the morning. So a wet start across parts of the southwest, parts of Wales, eventually moving into central areas and parts of the southeast through the morning. Some heavy downpours and turning quite blustery for a time too. Starting to turn quite wet across Northern Ireland, northwestern parts of England and Scotland too. Outbreaks of rain here, perhaps even seeing some snow skirt its way across the Pennines. This mainly confined to hills, but a brighter start across the far north and northeastern part of Scotland, but chilly, likely seeing some frost. And it's here where we'll see the brightest of the conditions. Any rain elsewhere slowly shifting its way eastwards, still heavy and persistent at times, turning a little bit brighter once this clears through, but still plenty of showers behind it, once again with a risk of hail and possibly some thunder. The driest of the weather across the far north of Scotland, and temperatures will be a slight touch down compared to what they were today, highs only reaching around 6 to 7 Celsius across Scotland. Through into the evening, any rain eventually clearing away. Still plenty of blustery showers, though, to start off the evening. And then eventually, as high pressure builds, these showers will ease away, leading to a largely dry night. And staying largely dry for the rest of the week and beginning of the weekend. Away from the far northwest, though, will eventually once again turn wet and windy.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:49 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, as energy bills rise once again, some analysts are blaming subsidies and net zero and renewables for these policies. But is that true? Well, to answer that question, I'm now joined in the studio by the energy expert and the CEO of the Association of Decentralised Energy, Caroline Bragg. Caroline, pleasure to have your company. Let's be honest, we were promised cheaper bills 3 times by Ed Miliband, Mr. Windmill. 300 quid, he said, was the figure. Today, the price has gone up yet again, £111 per year. People don't like it. Let's face it, net zero, it's a load of hot air.
Right. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today. I mean, I think the first thing to say is obviously, you know, for people this is going to be really hard. You know, we've seen really high bills over the last few years, particularly since the gas price crisis in 22-23. I think let's start with why we've seen the increases today. So a lot of the vast majority, about 80% of the increase we've seen today is because of the rise in wholesale energy costs. And that's mostly because of our exposure to volatile international gas markets.
So let's have our own gas. Let's drill, baby, drill.
Well, I mean, if it were that simple, right? I mean, I guess the way that I see this is that we use about half of the gas that we use in the country is from our own supplies, right? And that is part of broader gas markets, though. So just using our own is not a way to get the cost down. There are some things, though, that we can do to get the cost down immediately.
Go on.
The first thing is, do you know that we have as much waste heat in this country as could be used to heat all of the buildings in the UK?
But how do we make that? How do we translate wasted heat in, I don't know, an office block into Mr. and Mrs. Smith in Wigan having a cheaper bill?
Oh, well, let me tell you. So there's amazing things that are going on at the minute. So if you look down, actually, I've just been talking to a company they've got an energy from waste plant that's on the River Thames, and what they could be doing, which is what we do, for example, in Denmark, that saw very, very little increase in their heating bills over the energy crisis. What we could be doing is actually using that heat, putting it into infrastructure, a bit like your sort of gas pipes, for example, that take you to homes and buildings across the capital. And there is enough waste heat in that one energy from waste plant down the road.
How much would that cost? Building a huge network of pipeline from offices to houses. Come on, this is pie in the sky. What people want is dependable energy that isn't at the mercy of tyrants. Things like nuclear. Why don't we get on with it? Get on with building nuclear power plants.
I mean, you know, like, I all support nuclear, but that is not a quick fix, is it? I mean, we've been looking, what is it? EDF told me, and yourself, that we would be cooking our 2014 turkeys.
Yeah, but nobody ever got on with it. That's the point. They all drag their heels because politicians are short-term. They don't want 10-year projects because they might be booted out of power in 5 years. The whole point is a terrible lack of planning. And by the way, there is a huge amount of evidence to show that net zero subsidies are costing us 40% of the increase in our bills is because of subsidies. Net zero is making our bills more expensive, not cheaper.
No, I disagree. So 80% of the increases today are from the wholesale energy costs. That is largely because of where international gas markets are, and largely because we are in a situation where, for example, rightly, I think, we've stopped using Russian gas. For example, the way that we need to do this is not much greater use of gas that puts us in the hands of people like Putin and others.
But we stopped using Russian gas a long time ago. We import it instead from Norway. We import it instead from Qatar, from USA. And my point is, how does it make any sense to import gas when we've got our own? We've got liquid gold beneath our feet.
But unless you were to fundamentally change how we are using the gas we have domestically, it's not going to be something that brings down the price. The way that we should do it is the waste heat that I've talked about that will immediately reduce the prices. The other thing that I think is really fun is we are in a situation where our energy system at the minute is still pretty analogue, and all of the rules around it were ones that were designed 20, 30 years ago. If we made it, so we just have to change the rules so that you can be rewarded much more if you help keep the lights on, we could be saving about £100 by 2030.
OK, well, I admire your tenacity, and we went to the same university in Manchester, so we're part friends. Thank you very much for joining us on today's show. If you stay where you are for a moment, that is Caroline Bragg. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. Now, plenty more to come in the next hour, including my interview with the granny who was visited by a fate by the police. 2 coppers banged on her door. Guess what her heinous crime was? You've guessed it. A Facebook post where she criticised a Labour councillor, and for that, she got the Thought Police banging on her front door in Stockport. I'll be joined by that super grand next as she fights back. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now, here's your weather, and it's Honor Critic.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed Heat Pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Eventually we'll see daytime showers easing overnight, but that means clear skies, so turning chilly. We're likely to see a frost, but a different story in the west, turning wet and windy as this next frontal system starts to push its way eastwards, and we will start to see some showers continue for a time, particularly across the far northwest, where once again the odd shower may be heavy, but elsewhere these largely easing away, leaving a dry night. But that means plenty of clear skies, particularly across eastern areas. Those temperatures soon dipping away and likely to see a frost, particularly across the northeast of Scotland, but turning very wet and windy across parts of Northern Ireland, Wales, parts of Devon and Cornwall. We could actually see some quite heavy downpours by the time we reach the morning. So a wet start across parts of the southwest, parts of Wales, eventually moving into central areas and parts of the southeast through the morning. Some heavy downpours and turning quite blustery for a time too. Starting to turn quite wet across Northern Ireland, northwestern parts of England and Scotland too. Outbreaks of rain here, perhaps even seeing some snow skirt its way across the Pennines. This mainly confined to hills, but a brighter start across the far north and northeastern part of Scotland. But chilly, likely seeing some frost. And it's here where we'll see the brightest of the conditions. Any rain elsewhere slowly shifting its way eastwards, still heavy and persistent at times, turning a little bit brighter once this clears through, but still plenty of showers behind it, once again with a risk of hail and possibly some thunder. The driest of the weather across the far north of Scotland, and temperatures will be a slight touch down compared to what they were today, highs only reaching around 6 to 7 Celsius across Scotland. Through into the evening, any rain eventually clearing away. Still plenty of blustery showers, though, to start off the evening. And then eventually, as high pressure builds, these showers will ease away, leading to a largely dry night. And staying largely dry for the rest of the week and beginning of the weekend. Away from the far northwest, though, will eventually once again turn wet and windy.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Warwickshire, the M6 southbound is partly blocked after a collision. It's happened between junction 3 for Nuneaton and junction 2 for Coventry and the M69. In Berkshire, the M4 westbound is partly blocked after a breakdown. That's just before junction 10 for Wokingham and Bracknell. In Surrey, the M23 northbound is partly blocked by a breakdown as well. That's between Gatwick Airport at junction 9 and junction 8 for the M25. In Worcestershire, the M5 northbound is queuing after a collision involving a lorry and a car between junction 6 at Worcester and 5 at Droitwich. And in Devon at South Brent, the A38 is partly blocked eastbound after a collision just near the Rattery turnoff.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, has the Prime Minister finally read the room?
We'll cut our spending on development assistance, moving from 0.5% of GNI today to 0.3% in 2027.
Yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer committed to increasing defence spending to 2.5% by 2027, and to pay for it, he pledged to make the difficult choice to cut foreign aid. Now, is this the common sense policy, a bid to muzzle the Reform Party? Actually, is it a direct lift from the Reform Party's contract? And anyway, might Donald Trump demand Britain pays 5% later this week anyway? And despite Reform UK being met by masked Antifa thugs in Cornwall last night, as you can see on your screen, look at the state of that lot. A new poll has declared that Nigel Farage is actually Britain's most popular political leader, with the Prime Minister's popularity falling faster than a Mike Amesbury constituent. I'll be joined in the studio by the Red Wall Rottweiler, Mr. Lee Anderson. And a granny from Stockport who had 2 Thorpe police officers bang on her front door after, you guessed it, a complaint about a private Facebook post where she demanded a Labour councillor resign. I'll be joined by that super gran, Helen Joyce, who calls this a chilling clampdown on free speech. That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. You know, in Munich a couple of weeks ago, J.D. Vance, US Vice President, pointed to Great Britain as a chilling example of the erosion of free speech, how Facebook posts were being used to jail people. Meanwhile, former Labour MPs were knocking people to the floor repeatedly with punches, getting a mere 11 weeks in jail compared to 2 years for a Facebook post. You'd have thought any rational government would start to row back on banging on people's front doors for what they said on Facebook or what they tweeted about the Labour Party, but no. On the weekend, a woman in Stockport, Helen Joyce, had a visit from not one but 2 coppers complaining about what she'd said on Facebook about a Labour Party councillor. She wouldn't even get told who made the complaint. The police wouldn't even tell them. Greater Manchester Police has a terrible clear-up rate of crimes. 3 out of 4 shoplifters don't even get nicked. Why on earth are they wasting time banging on people's doors? Well, I'll be joined by Helen in about 20 minutes' time to find out exactly what happened to her. Get in touch the usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. Now it's your headlines, and here's Sophia Wesler.
Martin, thank you. It's just gone 4 o'clock. These are your headlines. Sir Keir Starmer has announced a major plan to increase defence spending to 2.5% by 2027, calling it the biggest sustained increase since the Cold War. But to fund it, the aid budget will be slashed from 0.5% to 0.3% of national income, sparking backlash from charities who warn of devastating consequences. The Institute for Fiscal Studies disputes Starmer's claim that defence will rise by £13.4 million a year, saying the true increase is closer to £6 billion. The IFS is warning that if defence spending goes beyond 2.5%, further cuts or tax rises may be needed. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says the move is needed to counter Vladimir Putin and uncertainty over US support ahead of talks with Donald Trump this week.
Starting today, I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027. Yeah. And we will maintain that for the rest of this Parliament.
However, the Prime Minister's pledge has been slammed by critics as too little too late, with calls for immediate action to strengthen funding. In a major speech this morning, Kemi Badenoch argued 2.5% isn't enough and that painful decisions on defence spending lie ahead.
We can no longer hide behind vapid statements that were, at best, ambitious 20 years ago and are now today outright irrelevant. It is time to speak the truth. The world has changed and the UK is not ready.
Now, energy bills are set to rise again, with Ofgem confirming a higher than expected increase of more than £100 a year from April. The 2.4% hike will push annual bills for a typical household to £1,849, affecting 22 million homes across England, Scotland and Wales. The regulator says rising wholesale costs are to blame and suggests customers consider fixing tariffs, but prices could fall again in July. Standing charges are also going up for gas, and consumer groups warn the increase will hit struggling families hard. Meanwhile, the government says it is extending help, with nearly 3 million more households set to get help with their energy bills next winter under the government's new plans. The proposals would expand the warm home discount, offering £150 to 2.7 million extra homes, including nearly 1 million with children. The government says the plans will ease the impact of gas price spikes and is also working with Ofgem on a potential debt relief scheme. Energy Secretary Ed Miliband says expanding the discount will help protect millions of families from rising costs. However, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrat Stacey Cooper told us vulnerable households can't afford to wait until next winter.
The government should scrap the energy price bill increase for the almost 10 million pensioners who have had their winter fuel payments taken away. We know from our own research that 9 in 10 people who are worried about energy bills have already changed their behaviour to try and keep their heating costs down. And now people are choosing between heating and eating. So we want the government to take action, not next winter, but right now.
In other news, the BBC has issued a public apology after a review revealed missed opportunities to address concerns over former Radio 1 DJ Tim Westwood's conduct. While the report found no widespread knowledge of serious allegations, the broadcaster admits it fell short of its values, apologising to those affected and promising changes to prevent future failures. Westwood, who strongly denies all allegations, was accused of creating a toxic work environment during his time at the BBC. The £3.3 million review also outlines steps the BBC has already taken to tackle bullying and harassment. And a man has admitted stalking Strictly Come Dancing judge Shirley Ballas. 37-year-old Carl Shaw pleaded guilty at Liverpool Crown Court today after being charged with stalking the 64-year-old dancer and TV star. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Now, Sir Keir Starmer is to cut the UK's foreign aid budget in what's raised eyebrows on the political left in order to boost defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027. Now, the Prime Minister said the government will deliver the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War era, but it can only be funded by diverting resources from elsewhere. Now, let's remind you of what the Prime Minister said when he made that announcement earlier.
We will cut our spending on development assistance, moving from 0.5% of GNI today to 0.3% in 2027.
Well, I speak now with GB News political editor Chris Hope, who joins me in studio. Chris, you were just saying how funereal they looked in the background there, Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves. This is a policy, let's be honest, straight out of the playbook of the political right. In fact, this is the exact policy from Reform's contract with the people. It's a direct lift of Reform's policies. No wonder Rachel Reeves like she's been slapped.
As we've been saying all afternoon. I mean, I think today is almost the moment, I think, Labour shed the clothes of opposition and became a party of government. They've done something which they absolutely would hate to do. You saw Angela Rayner there and Rachel Reeves, the Deputy Leader and, of course, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, looking like they're going to vomit. I mean, look really, really upset because what they're doing here is cutting the aid budget by about £6 billion in 2027. I mean, on the left, that is a disaster for the left. We heard from Sir Keir Starmer. He said that it remains a cut. I won't pretend otherwise. It's a very difficult decision on aid, he said. It's the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. I think it's a good result for Keir Starmer. He has always said he would put country before party. He's literally doing that. He's fashioning ploughshares into swords. He is using aid money
for weapons. This is exactly what you might expect a Tory government to do. In fact, he's 3 years ahead of where the Tories would be if they won power. They planned 2.5% by 2030, but they may have changed that once Trump won and once Trump appeared to disavow protecting Europe. They may have moved faster too. But today, when I asked Kevin Badenoch that very question a long time ago, but also this morning, when are you going to hit 2.5% of GDP? She wouldn't say.
Yeah, well, of course, they're not in power. Let's just get those graphics on screen. I think we've actually got those screen grabs of the Reform Manifesto. And they're basically identical. Let's just run through, if you could, what Keir Starmer said and what Nigel Farage said back in July.
This is me being a bit busy over my lunch break looking at the internet, but it's fascinating, I think, watching this. So back in July 2024, you see there on screen, the Reform UK Party was to get to 2.5% of GDP by year 3 of a Reform government. That will be 2027, so tick. Labour's doing the same thing. 3% within 6 years by 2030, well, by 2035. So still, the number's going to get there, but 5 years after Reform wanted. And the second interesting idea was on aid. Now, Reform UK said they would save $6 billion from the $12.8 billion aid budget. That's exactly what the government's doing. It's not quite the same as halving it. It's 0.5% of GDP, or GNI, gross national income, to 0.3%, but still $6 billion being saved. Obviously, the figures are on the previous year's economy. But as the economy grows, this will be a bigger pie. So half the money is coming from cutting the aid budget and half the money from growth in the economy.
But, Chris, hang on a minute. At the weekend, Keir Starmer said that the Reform were dangerous. They were right-wing. Mere days later, 2 days later, borrowing Nigel Farage's clothes. Does that make their policies dangerous and right-wing?
Well, you are naughty, Martin. I mean, we don't quite know exactly what the PM was talking about. He may be talking about some of the cozying up to Putin, which Farage did about 10 years ago, admiring Putin as a strong leader, slow to call out when Trump was disavowing Zelensky. We had to wait a day before we heard from Nigel Farage saying, actually, listen, watch what he does. He doesn't always mean what he says, that kind of defence of what
Trump's he's nicked his policies on defence and foreign aid.
Yeah,
looks like.
I think what's happening here is the government the PM is getting ready to fly to America tomorrow. I'll be on the plane with him for GB News, and he's doing Trump-like policies. Now, earlier today, away from the news cycle, the government announced a massive review of the government credit card. If they find any misspending, they will take action against people who have done that. This is called the government procurement card. It's often in newspapers for spending money in questionable ways, put it that way. So this line-by-line spending review being carried out by Darren Jones, number 2 in the Treasury, this is all going towards the kind of the Doge idea, Department of Government Efficiency. The PM wants to meet Trump this week on the same terms. Say, look, I'm doing this locally with my spending budget. I'm cutting the aid budget. That's hard for a left-wing politician like me, Donald Trump. Let's try and get back on terms.
It's a funny old world. You've got Keir Starmer saying that things are dangerous and right-wing, and then days later, channeling his inner Nigel Farage, channeling his inner Elon Musk, and his
Donald Trump.
I mean, but, of course, everything could change because Donald Trump might say, actually, Keir, this looks great, but I want 5% from you, or 5% from everybody in NATO.
He said that. Now, Trump did say that in that press conference he gave back in Mar-a-Lago. I think I was watching it here. I think it must have been December after he won the election. He said 5% there, but the US government is only on about 3.2%. It's nowhere near 5%. 5% is a target to get to, but for a bigger economy like we are, we can't get there. By the way, we are the NATO's third biggest spending money in the defence budget contributor, so we are doing well there.
OK, Chris Oakes, stick with us. Let's continue this conversation now. I'm joined by the political commentator, Benedict Spence. Benedict, always a pleasure to have you on the show. So, who'd have thought that Keir Starmer would be a political magpie eyeing up the shiny baubles of Nigel Farage? That came out all wrong, but you know exactly what I mean.
I was going to say, it was only a matter of time. Only a matter of time also until I think Labour actually had to start nicking policies off of Reform or anybody else because, you know, we can't let's be charitable. Things haven't been great, have they, for Labour since they've got in? Not a lot of this has been working. I mean, you did point out there with Chris Hope that the Labour front bench were not looking particularly happy about the idea that they can't give quite as much of the taxpayers' money away to foreign countries who aren't very efficient with the money and who don't particularly like us anyway. But, the money does have to come from somewhere, and I think the fact that it'll come from the foreign aid budget will go down pretty well with voters, actually. I think that that's the key thing, is that they've done something that is not only morally correct, but potentially politically popular as well. So today really is an unusual day. Will it actually go far enough? It's actually a bit of a drop in the ocean. I mean, I heard Chris saying there that we do spend a lot more than many of our NATO allies on defence, but still, this money will not go very far, and this is something that needs to be said. If people think that the NHS is a bit of a funding black hole, boy, wait until you see the Ministry of Defence and the fact that they can just make billions disappear with nothing to show for it, not even just fewer hospital beds. Entire platoons just disappear. Nuclear submarines just don't work. It really is a miracle. So that is something that is going to have to go hand in hand, not just finding more money for the armed forces, but a real efficiency drive there.
But Benedict, has to be said, back to the slashing of foreign aid. It's long been the preserve of the political right to bang on about, girl bands in Ethiopia, about space projects in Nigeria, all this kind of wanton waste. Talk about money going missing in defence. By Jove, money can go missing in places like Sudan. And here we are now, and we have Sir Keir Starmer basically wearing those clothes. There's no wonder that Angela Rayner looked like it was a funeral. There's no wonder that Rachel Reeves looked like she'd been slapped around the face with a wet fish. This is basically right-wing politics.
It is, and we're all sat here going that they've taken it from the Reform Party, but actually we're sort of also almost forgetting that there was an ostensibly right-wing government in power for 14 years, and they never thought to do this. It really does show you not just that Labour are opposed to this sort of thing, but a lot of so-called Conservatives think that this sort of thing is completely anathema. But that's because the UK is waking up very slowly to the reality that the concept of soft power is an illusion. Soft power exists if you have hard power to back it up. So basically, soft power exists if you're the United States or China, or in the Arab world if you're Saudi Arabia or Iran. Britain does not have that kind of soft power, and as you point out, no amount of money given to sub-Saharan African pop groups or space programs, wherever it may be, is actually going to improve our lot. As much as anything else, because we are not, in fact, the only country giving money to these places. China gives rather a lot of it, and China doesn't turn around and say, in return for our money, you're going to have to get really good on democracy or trans rights or whatever it is. They just go, okay, here's some money, and we just want really good trade relations with you. And that's something else, is that for a very long time, our foreign aid has been part and parcel of trying to push an agenda that a lot of the recipients of this money don't want, and frankly have just ignored.
Benedict Spence, what a funny old word it is. The adaptation of the right-wing dangerous policies of reform by the Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Benedict Spence, for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Back to studio now, Chris Hope. I wanted to talk to you about something that happened yesterday down in Cornwall. I think we have some footage on our screen now. Antifa turned up, hard left protesters at the event down in Cornwall. You and I spoke last week, of course, about Zara Sultana, the independent ex-Labour independent MP for Coventry, planning a big event, she said, at the Reform rally in March in Birmingham. Do you think these kind of protests now are going to become a part and parcel of wherever Reform go? And actually, they say that Reform is dangerous. What kind of hoodlums are turning up in masks and threatening people when they're on the way into political events? Isn't it the hard left, actually, that are dangerous?
And we certainly hope not. I mean, those scenes last night were unusual. Nigel Farage said as much. He said it was very, very rare to be met with such anger like that they saw in Cornwall yesterday. They used to name-calling, Farage told us, but a few eggs being thrown. But this is Antifa, he said, a dangerous American organisation, Farage claimed. They see violent progress, he says, as acceptable. But that is not acceptable, and one would hope it's not. You see there on the footage there. It's a problem. I mean, we got through the election, I think, without too... Well, I know we had issues there with the milkshake being chucked on Nigel Farage, and he wasn't sure what was in the vessel when it was thrown on him. But one would hope this wouldn't be something we're seeing in the future. But we are seeing Zara Sultana having a counter-demonstration, let's say, put it that way, to what Reform are planning later next month, and we hope that to pass off peacefully. And some breaking news, some fun pictures just been sent in to us here. Mike Ainsbury, of course, the Runcorn Rocky, presently at His Majesty's pleasure. Been sent this, look. This is Runcorn Needs Reform, Chris Hope. They're playing a bit of mischief, sending this van around, and they've started a website called resignmike.com. Look, they've got him there made up as in a wanted picture. He's going to jail. Mugshot.
They're obviously trying to force some kind of by-election. We spoke about this yesterday. ResignMike.com. Do you think he will resign, or is that just not going to happen? He'll just cling on to power?
Well, I understand that he keeps being paid to be an MP until this, assuming his appeal is not granted, then there'll be a 6-week process to have a vote on whether there should be a referendum. He would get paid during that process until if the 10% of local people is breached. I mean, it's not just Reform UK want the by-election, so do the Tories and so do Labour. They think this guy should be out of Parliament. He's now an independent. His political career is over. He is paid, though, as long as he still is the MP. Those are the rules, so let's wait and see.
Currently enjoying porridge, but still being paid fully as a Member of Parliament.
That's the rules. Those are the rules.
A lot of people will say, Chris, that perhaps those rules should be changed. Seems astonishing.
You can't leave an area without an MP. I mean, what you could do, I suppose, is have an MP share the responsibilities, such as when an MP is ill or when you have an MP giving birth to a baby. But in this situation, you can't disenfranchise. But how on earth you write to your own MP who's in prison is a mystery to you and me. On Reform UK, where they are set to choose their candidate this week, there were rumours yesterday, which we reported about Aaron Banks standing. He's the millionaire founder of the Brexit Party in the old days and UKIP. I'm not sure if he'll get it, but we'll wait and see.
Again, there we go. That one will grow and grow. Thank you very much, Chris Hope. As ever, a pleasure to have you here in Westminster. Now, we're giving you 2 chances to win in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 amazing prize bundles to be won. And here's all the details you need to enter.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16, and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, coming up next, a super gran from Stockport had 2 thought police officers bang on her front door. Guess what? Of course, it's after a complaint about a private Facebook post where she demanded a Labour councillor resign, and the thought police turned up in an area where they can't even solve real crime. I'll be joined by that granny, Helen Joyce, next, who calls this a chilling clampdown on free speech. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:25 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, a grandmother in Greater Manchester was visited by police officers after she criticised Labour politicians on Facebook. Now, detectives questioned 54-year-old Helen Jones after she called for the resignation of local councillors involved in that WhatsApp scandal. Now, although Greater Manchester Police agreed that Helen had committed no crime, she had said that she feels intimidated into being silent online and would not post again. Well, we're now joined by that super grand Helen Jones on GB News. Helen, a pleasure to have you on the show. An astonishing state of affairs. Greater Manchester is an area that basically fails to solve 3 out of 4 shoplifting incidents. It won't even report its violent crime figures when we ask them, and yet they find time to knock on your front door for a Facebook post. How on earth did that make you feel?
Well, it was a shock because you don't often see plainclothes police officers. They're only sort of like used for very important things. So at first they knocked on the door. Obviously I wasn't in. So I spent 45 minutes worrying until they actually rang me. I was getting ready to go to a police station to ask what it was about, because you sort of see those things on the TV and it's to tell you if a relative has passed away or similar. So I was absolutely astounded when they told me what it was for.
And then you asked them who made the complaint and they wouldn't even tell you.
No, I did. When they told me what it was about, a Facebook post, I did put the names to them and they actually said, we can confirm your thought process is correct. So they were more or less saying, you know, I'm right in who I'm saying it is, at which point I was like quite annoyed.
But look, Helen, we live in a society where anybody should be free to criticise anybody they like within the realms of acceptable speech, which your comments were. I've seen them. A lot of people are saying, including J.D. Vance, the Vice President of America, that free speech seems to be under big, big peril in the United Kingdom. Would you agree with that?
I would. With this happening, definitely. It just makes you question everything before you put it down in writing. You know, am I going to get in trouble for this when it's a perfectly valid comment? It wasn't derogatory. It was just what you generally hear with politicians. Are you going to resign?
And, you know, you're an ordinary, hard-working taxpayer. You've never been in trouble before in your life. How harrowing was it, just having 2 coppers banging on your door? This is not the sort of thing that happens to ordinary people like yourself.
No, it was mainly the worry that what do they want? You know, had I been in, maybe it wouldn't have been as scary because obviously I'd have known straight away what it was about. And I found it quite amusing afterwards, to be honest, because I just couldn't believe it. Amusing, but obviously very angry. I did actually say to them that I was very annoyed about it and, you know, go and chase real crime. Because I just think, you know, councillor has abused his right there and got the police. If I went to them, I don't think they'd have been knocking on somebody else's door if I'd have put a complaint in.
And isn't that the point? You know, people say so often they can't get hold of a copper if they have their house burgled. They can't get hold of a copper if their car's broken into. People walk into shops and take whatever they want all over the shop, and they never seem to get apprehended. And suddenly you get in the long arm of the law banging on your door of a Facebook post. And we've saw this, have we not, since those riots in Southport. Do you think there's a complete lack of understanding of the priorities of modern policing?
Definitely. I mean, I don't really know the process of this and how this complaint has actually been dealt with. I am going to take it further, but, you know, was it someone senior to them that sent them out? Did they decide? Did they have a choice in coming out? People have said different things, but you would think that they'd have the common sense to just say, I'm not going out for this. And the amazing thing is the police have my telephone number anyway, because years ago I used to liaise with them about community crime and post it on Facebook on their behalf. So they didn't have to come to the door flashing a warrant card the way they did.
It's even more astonishing. You know, you're one of the good guys who've been helping the police in the past. Helen, can I ask you, there's been a lot of conversation about two-tier policing, about politicised policing. Do you think that in this particular instance, Labour councillors were utilising leverage to get that knock on your front door? Do you think that the police do feel politicised?
Definitely. Definitely. I know for a fact if I went with the same complaint, they'd have pushed me out the station. They wouldn't have even picked up a pen to note it down. It's because it's come from a councillor.
And what does that say to you about somebody who pays your council tax, who pays your taxes, who goes to work? You're perfectly entitled to criticise any public official. We all are. We still just about live in a free country with free speech, Helen Joyce. What does it say to you when the moment you speak out, they're banging on your door?
Almost given up on this country. I'd encourage my children to move abroad. If this is how this country is going, what's the point? What's the point in anything? They're elected by us to represent us. They're entitled to be questioned about things they've done.
Well, Helen Jones, you're absolutely right. Thank you so much for talking to us here on GB News today. Keep your chin up, stay in touch, and the very, very best of British. It's wonderful to speak to you, Helen. You take care. Thank you very, very much, darling. No problem. Thank you. Now, Greater Manchester Police issued the following statement in relation to this case. We are under a duty to inform her that she is the subject of a complaint. The genuine threats that have been made to local councillors recently have meant it has been more necessary to ensure that all reports are looked at. So there we go. Lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including shocking GB News analysis, which shows that net zero policies now account for an astonishing 40% of the increase in your electricity bills since 2015, including that 111 quid hike today. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Your headlines at 4:32. Sir Keir Starmer has announced a major plan to increase defence spending to 2.5% by 2027, calling it the biggest sustained increase since the Cold War. But to fund it, the aid budget will be slashed from 0.5% to 0.3% of national income, sparking backlash from charities who warn of devastating consequences. The Institute for Fiscal Studies disputes Starmer's claim that defence will rise by £13.4 million a year, saying the true increase is closer to £6 billion. The IFS is warning that if defence spending goes beyond 2.5%, further cuts or tax rises may be needed. Now, energy bills are set to rise again, with Ofgem confirming a higher-than-expected increase of more than £100 a year from April. The 6.4% hike will push annual bills for a typical household to £1,849, affecting 22 million homes across England, Scotland and Wales. The regulator says rising wholesale costs are to blame and suggests customers consider fixing tariffs, but prices could fall again in July. Standing charges are also going up for gas, and consumer groups warn the increase will hit struggling families hard. In other news, former Archbishop of Canterbury, George Carey, is facing potential disciplinary action after a scathing abuse report rocked the Church of England. The Mackin Review revealed that church leaders, including Carey, failed to act on decades of abuse by Christian camp leader John Smythe, despite being aware of it. Carey, who resigned as a priest in December over a separate case, is one of 10 clergy named in the report, now under investigation. The Church's National Safeguarding Team is seeking to bring proceedings, even though the 12-month time limit for such cases has passed. The Church has issued a heartfelt apology to the victims, with survivors' lifelong suffering at the heart of their response. And the Queen has just revealed that there's a new pet at the palace.
I've just got a new puppy who's 8 weeks old. Oh, you're full of
77-year-old Queen Camilla visited the Beanie House of Art and Knowledge in Canterbury today, where she shared for the first time that she welcomed a new dog to the royal family. The royal said the puppy was 8 weeks old and a rescue breed who was a bit of everything. Queen Camilla also revealed her unique name and its inspiration. He said she's called Molly, looks just like a mole. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Derbyshire, the M1 is partly blocked both ways for roadworks. They're between junction 28 for Mansfield and junction 30 for Worksop and the A616. In Warwickshire, the M6 southbound is partly blocked after a collision. It's between junction 3 for Nuneaton and junction 2 for Coventry and the M69. In Hampshire, the M27 is partly blocked both ways for resurfacing work, and that's between junction 5 for Southampton Airport and junction 8 for Hamble. And in Devon, delays at South Brent on the A38 expressway. That's partly blocked eastbound after a collision near the Rattery turnoff, so do expect delays on the approach.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's the body image thing that concerns me. It's young girls watching Love Island and really skinny girls and young boys
hit
exactly.
the gym after this. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, they're seeing perfect bodies on the screen.
You don't need to go in the gym, Maymoon. You look gorgeous as you are, love.
I know. You see, the reason I don't enter anything like that, Kerry, is you know
you're gonna win.
Exactly. And it's not fair. It's not fair, I think, on everybody else being there.
It's not fair.
No.
So, Kerry, what do you think about the body image thing? You know, when you talk about your daughter, is that something that you'd worry about, her comparing herself to the likes of what she sees on the screen?
Now, this is where there's a conflict of interest for me because I've been brought up in this industry since I was 17, so it's massively affected me. I mean, when you're put on the front cover of magazines after having a baby with a stretch mark in the circle of shame, you know, it does do a psychological effect on you. I think a lot of celebrities who've been around for so many years as I have been affected by that. But everyone has to bear in mind, I've had my children. I'm in my 40s. I feel I'm entitled to have my tweaks and try and improve on what I think are going down south and health and safety, tripping over any things that I don't want to be tripping over anymore. But I definitely do believe, I mean, majority of the young girls that go on Love Island, they all have the same big lips, the same big eyelashes, all the butt implants, and they're barely in their 20s. You know, it's if you go to the airport now, I remember going to the airport and I looked around and all the girls looked exactly the same.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, good mate, your time is 4:38 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. trans police officers will be allowed to strip search women despite ongoing backlash from critics. New guidance for the National Police Chiefs Council says that biologically male staff who identify as women should be allowed to intimately search women as long as they possess a gender recognition certificate. Now, what could possibly go wrong? But some women's rights groups claim that the police had forgotten about women in their pursuit of gender ideology. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm now joined by the Surrey Police and Crime Commissioner, Lisa Townsend. Lisa, a delight to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much for joining us. A lot of people have very, very legitimate concerns that if you're a woman, you're in a vulnerable position, you're being searched intimately, it should be another woman who is searching you. And a trans woman, in a lot of people's eyes, isn't a woman. They're a biological man who says they're a woman. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I completely agree, Martin. But I have to say, and I hate to say, I'm not surprised about this latest announcement from the NPCC. I'm afraid that this is just the latest in a long line of announcements like this from the NCC about the ability for trans police officers to search women, males, essentially, to search women. We wouldn't think it was OK anywhere else, and it's not OK in policing. I think there's also another way of looking at this, which is it's not just male officers, and they are born male. We are talking about males being able to search women. It's also the other way round. It's also female officers potentially being told that they have to search a trans woman, i.e. a male who has been brought into custody. That male could have been brought into custody because he himself has been violent, and he is insisting that he is a woman and therefore, you know, there's no time to check the gender recognition certificate, but that's how he identifies, and he insists on a female officer searching him. So I think we have to look at this on both sides, and either way, it can't be right.
Lisa Townsend, when I speak to coppers like you, common sense coppers, it gives me real hope. It's the same with a friend of ours, Donald Jones, who's the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire. And yet, we seem to be getting orders coming down from above, which is pandering to gender ideology and not reality. Where did we go so wrong?
Well, and again, I'm not surprised, and the current chair of the NPCC, I'm afraid, has form here. He was a chief constable in Surrey before he became chair of the NPCC, so I didn't appoint him, but he was chief constable when I became police and crime commissioner, and I'm afraid this is his view. He's always been very clear. He's made public statements about it. He's made public statements, certainly within the force, against me on this issue when I spoke up about it nearly 4 years ago. So I'm not surprised to see the NPCC doing this. What I would say is each chief constable is operationally independent within their own force, and I want to see forces push back against this, and chief constables think very carefully about as PCCs and the way we do about the constituents we serve. I want chief constables to think about the public they serve. There's an awful lot of work has gone in recent years, right across policing, right across our country, around making women feel safer, both in the presence of police officers and in men more generally. I think it would be such a shame if we were to now go backwards on this as policing, because we're ignoring what can be certainly a very vulnerable group.
Well, that's precisely right. And there are over 70,000 strip searches conducted in police stations and other locations across the UK every year. And if even one of them is invasive in a way that harms somebody who is very vulnerable. You know, we used to look after women. We used to take care of women. We used to put the needs of women rightly on a pedestal, particularly when they're at their most vulnerable, when they're being arrested or they're being searched over circumstances we do not know the individual circumstances of them. Why is it then that the rights of a tiny percentile of the population seem to trump the common sense rights of the vast majority, more than 50% of Britons?
Well, and that is, it's common sense. And actually, I don't think women here are asking to be put on a pedestal. I don't think we are asking for special treatment. We're asking for the very basic sort of human right of being treated with dignity. And for many of us, that means that if we are in a position where we're in custody And let's be honest, Martin, any of us could end up in custody for any reason. You know, it's not only guilty people who go into custody, but even those who have committed an offence. It could be any of us. You are incredibly vulnerable. That's why we do so much work as police and crime commissioners with independent custody visitors to make sure that the standards in custody are good, to make sure that everybody is looked after, whether they have a health need or any other need. And it's just really basic, isn't it, to say that women in custody and men in custody should be treated with the absolute most basic dignity.
Yeah, Lisa, you know, I wasn't suggesting, when I said put them on a pedestal, I think that just comes from my innate desire to protect women, which, you know, that might be an old-fashioned sexist. It might make me a dinosaur. I just believe we should protect women. I think that's any society's role, and I just wonder if the police have lost sight of that, having been captured by this woke ideology. And do you think there's any end to this? Or is this now a never-ending cakewalk of madness?
No, well, I do actually think we have turned a corner. I mean, I remember, and it is nearly 4 years ago now, when I came out publicly and said what I said about Stonewall and about self-ID and about the pendulum having swung too far in the other way. We had a real problem in policing years ago and decades ago around the way in which they treated minorities and the way in which particularly they treated gay men and women. And thankfully, we've seen a massive, massive change in that. And that's really, really good thing. And we have to applaud that. My view is the pendulum has swung too far the other way. Now, when I first said that, I received a huge amount of criticism. I was called brave for doing it and received criticism from, as I said, my own chief constable at the time, who is now chair of the NPCC, for saying that. I was called bigoted and transphobic and all kinds of things. I have to say I got a lot more support, actually, from women right across the country and the world for saying it. It's not considered brave to say it anymore. And that's really important. That can only be a good thing. I do think we've turned a corner. However, we are still seeing some individuals who are campaigning, quite frankly. And that's exactly what we're seeing with the NPCC. They're taking a political issue and they're insisting on essentially running a campaign rather than actually doing the job of protecting the most vulnerable in our society.
You know, hallelujah for coppers like you. Thank you for coming on today. I think the huge majority of people agree with your common sense position. Thanks for speaking out. Please continue to do so. And please come back on the show. An excellent guest. That's Lisa Townsend, the Surrey Police and Crime Commissioner. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Cheers. Isn't it great just to get a common sense copper on like that? You know, we speak so often about woke ideology, and you speak to somebody like that, it just gives you absolute faith that there is hope. Now, talking of which, if you're in search of some winter sun this year, then here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're heading away for some winter sun through this week, there will be some fine weather around across parts of the Mediterranean, but currently around the eastern Med it's still fairly unsettled. Some heavy rain, some strong winds and temperatures well below average for the time of year, but these are gradually going to be lifting. Further west, a drier story across many parts of, well, France and Spain, but there is some wet weather starting to push its way in as we go later on this week. Otherwise, some decent sunshine on offer. See you later.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Eventually we'll see daytime showers easing overnight, but that means clear skies, so turning chilly. We're likely to see a frost, but a different story in the west, turning wet and windy as this next frontal system starts to push its way eastwards, and we will start to see some showers continue for a time, particularly across the far northwest, where once again the odd shower may be heavy, but elsewhere these largely easing away, leaving a dry night. But that means plenty of clear skies, particularly across eastern areas. Those temperatures soon dipping away and likely to see a frost, particularly across the northeast of Scotland, but turning very wet and windy across parts of Northern Ireland, Wales, parts of Devon and Cornwall. We could actually see some quite heavy downpours by the time we reach the morning. So a wet start across parts of the southwest, parts of Wales, eventually moving into central areas and parts of the southeast through the morning. Some heavy downpours and turning quite blustery for a time too. Starting to turn quite wet across Northern Ireland, northwestern parts of England and Scotland too. Outbreaks of rain here, perhaps even seeing some snow skirt its way across the Pennines. This mainly confined to hills, but a brighter start across the far north and northeastern part of Scotland, but chilly, likely seeing some frost. And it's here where we'll see the brightest of the conditions. Any rain elsewhere slowly shifting its way eastwards, still heavy and persistent at times, turning a little bit brighter once this clears through, but still plenty of showers behind it, once again with a risk of hail and possibly some thunder. The driest of the weather across the far north of Scotland, and temperatures will be a slight touch down compared to what they were today, highs only reaching around 6 to 7 Celsius across Scotland. Through into the evening, any rain eventually clearing away. Still plenty of blustery showers, though, to start off the evening. And then eventually, as high pressure builds, these showers will ease away, leading to a largely dry night. And staying largely dry for the rest of the week and beginning of the weekend. Away from the far northwest, though, will eventually once again turn wet and windy.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 5 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, most of Britain's skyrocketing electricity bills are being blamed on subsidies for renewables and net zero policies. A new analysis shows since 2015, the electricity price cap, has jumped from 664 quid to £994 per year in today's price. Now, that's an astonishing increase of 330 quid or 50% over a decade. Now, despite governments pointing the finger at rising gas prices on the global markets, the analysis for GB News shows that the biggest culprit is the explosion in subsidies for renewable energy and net zero policies, which account for 40% of the increase in our bills since 2015. It's astonishing. And let's speak now to the director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montford. Andrew, this is incredible. They always blame fossil fuels, but the truth, it seems, is a bit more green.
Absolutely. I think we have to be clear here what we're talking about. We're talking about electricity bills. And while Mr. Miliband tries to blame the rise in electricity bills on gas, it isn't. It's mainly down to renewable energy policy. It's subsidies to wind and solar farms, and it's dealing with the intermittency that they cause because the wind doesn't blow all the time, and building new pylons and cables to deal with it. There is a bigger picture, if you like, which is the energy bill as a whole, which where we are suffering from high gas prices. But I think the thing we have to realize is that there are things we can do about high gas prices. The solution, and any economist will tell you, the solution to high prices of anything is to increase the supply of it. So let's try and increase the supply of gas. How about fracking for all that shale gas under Lancashire and central Scotland? That would be a sensible thing to do.
But that, of course, would make you somebody who wants the planet to burn. That would make you the personification of evil.
Well, yeah, of course, in some people's books it would. But let's face it, we are going to keep burning gas, whatever. And all we're doing by refusing to drill locally is we're drilling essentially overseas, and then we're wasting a lot of carbon emissions, shipping the gas here as liquefied natural gas or down pipelines. We're going to use the same amount of gas. So, let's use the local stuff. It's cheaper and the emissions are lower. So, that's definitely the way forward. But Mr. Miliband, unfortunately, doesn't see it that way.
Will any of this information, this factually based information, Andrew Montford, make people like Ed Miliband change their mind? Or is something else at play here? Is it zealotry, not reality?
He is very definitely a zealot. And I think the problem with zealots is that they will pursue whatever crazy aim they've given themselves, regardless of the pain it causes other people. And we're seeing this constantly. Mr. Miliband is handing out subsidies to wind farms. He's just proposed extending the subsidies on new wind farms from 15 years to 20 years. He tells us they're cheaper than any other form of electricity generation. So it's hard to understand why they need these extra subsidies. And of course, we have to pay through our bills. And so, yeah, he doesn't care about the pain he's causing us. He thinks he's saving the planet. He isn't saving the planet. He's actually making things worse, if anything. But he doesn't care what happens to ordinary people, poor people along the way. And that's a really very dangerous situation. Okay. I hope that Keir Starmer is more rational about it.
OK, we have to leave it there. Excellent, as ever, Director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montford, with that exclusive analysis for GB News. Thank you very much. Plenty more coming in the final hour of the show, including a live Downing Street statement from the Prime Minister. And I'll be joined for analysis of that with Lee Anderson in the studio. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now it's your weather with Honor Krisick.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Eventually we'll see daytime showers easing overnight, but that means clear skies, so turning chilly, we're likely to see a frost. But a different story in the west, turning wet and windy as this next frontal system starts to push its way eastwards. And we will start to see some showers continue for a time, particularly across the far northwest, where once again the odd shower may be heavy. But elsewhere, these largely easing away, leaving a dry night. But that means plenty of clear skies, particularly across eastern areas. Those temperatures soon dipping away and likely to see a frost, particularly across the northeast of Scotland, but turning very wet and windy across parts of Northern Ireland, Wales, parts of Devon and Cornwall. Could actually see some quite heavy downpours by the time we reach the morning. So a wet start across parts of the southwest, parts of Wales, eventually moving into central areas and parts of the southeast through the morning. Some heavy downpours and turning quite blustery for a time too. Starting to turn quite wet across Northern Ireland, northwestern parts of England and Scotland too. Outbreaks of rain here, perhaps even seeing some snow skirt its way across the Pennines. This mainly confined to hills, but a brighter start across the far north and northeastern part of Scotland, but chilly, likely seeing some frost. And it's here where we'll see the brightest of the conditions. Any rain elsewhere slowly shifting its way eastwards, still heavy and persistent at times, turning a little bit brighter once this clears through, but still plenty of showers behind it, once again with a risk of hail and possibly some thunder. The driest of the weather across the far north of Scotland, and temperatures will be a slight touch down compared to what they were today, highs only reaching around 6 to 7 Celsius across Scotland. Through into the evening, any rain eventually clearing away. Still plenty of blustery showers, though, to start off the evening. And then eventually, as high pressure builds, these showers will ease away, leading to a largely dry night. And staying largely dry for the rest of the week and beginning of the weekend. Away from the far northwest, though, will eventually once again turn wet and windy.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Cheshire, the M6 northbound is partly blocked after a collision involving a car and a lorry. It's between junction 18 for Middlewich and 19 for Knutsford. In Derbyshire, the M1 is partly blocked both ways for roadworks. They're between junction 28 for Mansfield and 30 for Worksop. In Warwickshire, the M6 northbound is partly blocked after a collision. It's between junction 2 for Coventry and junction 3 for Nuneaton and Coventry. In Hampshire, the M27, 2 lanes shut there in both directions. That's for resurfacing work, and they're taking place between junction 5 at Southampton Airport and junction 8 for Hamble.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British Giveaway. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16 and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Now, Sir Keir Starmer is to cut the UK's foreign aid budget in order to boost defence spending by 2.5% of GDP by 2027. And the Prime Minister said the government will deliver the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War era, but it can only be funded by diverting resources from elsewhere. And let's remind you of the moment of that announcement earlier today.
We will cut our spending on development assistance, moving from 0.5% of GNI today to 0.3% in 2027.
Now, very shortly, we're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister live from Downing Street. But ahead of that, let's have a chat about what happened earlier. I'm joined in the studio now by the Reform UK for Ashfield, Lee Anderson, and the political commentator, Matthew Stadlen. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Always fireworks fly when you pair get in the studio. Let's start with you, Lee Anderson, if we could. So, few recognisable policies, perhaps, earlier on when Sir Keir Starmer came out. Earlier at the weekend, he was calling the Reform Party dangerous and right-wing. Yet today, he seemed to, borrow your policies. Tell us more.
Yeah, it's strange, that, Martin, because he made a series of promises before the election, which he's not stuck to, by the way. And now one of the big decisions he's got to make on the back of this week is about our defence budget. And he's actually done a cut and paste from our manifesto, which was on our website 12 months ago. It's exactly the same. Exactly the same. So he's steering Reform's policies. We're quite happy, by the way, that there's only 5 MPs in Parliament, but we're dragging both the main parties into a position of common sense where we will increase our defence spending and put the security of our country first. I know Matthew's chomping at the bit there, but surely, Matthew, you've got to admit this is a good thing, and it's great that they've copied Reform UK's policy.
When the facts change, you've got to change your policy. And there's been a major factual change in the last week. Extraordinary. For the first time in my life, I'm 45 years old, a bit younger than you two. I now think, well, is America really behind us if we need it? And that is, if you think about it, you don't have to be a student of history to get this, an astonishing tectonic shift. The idea that America is behaving not as a hostile power, but threatening tariffs on allies and saying that Europe basically needs to defend itself, and calling, by the way, a leader of Ukraine a dictator, someone who was democratically elected.
But back to today. Angela Rayner, the Deputy PM, and Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, it's fair to say, look like they've been slapped with a wet cod round the chops.
Yeah.
Well, when Keir Starmer basically said, we're going to cut foreign aid to fund defence. This is the right-wing policy. Oh, the Labour policy now right-wing.
The international setup, as I've said, has changed dramatically, and the question is, how are we going to fund that? We don't know whether we're going to get significant growth yet. A lot of our public services are on their knees. My view is a government's first responsibility is to its own people. These are extraordinary times, and therefore it seems to me to make sense, reluctantly, to cut the... Why are you laughing? I'm
smiling in the same way Leanne's is smiling. It's like everybody is suddenly right-wing. Having heard at the weekend that right-wing was dangerous.
Let's just recap, Martin. This is a Reform UK policy. It's a common-sense policy. It's a slash foreign aid. You know, if we want to fund things, you know, like the war in Ukraine or defence spending, we've got to find the money from somewhere, and it's the most sensible option. We've been saying this now for well over 12 months, Matthew. There's other areas as well where they could cut this. Look at GB Energy, look at net zero. There's all these ways of saving money in this country.
I am concerned about the way we've done foreign aid for the following reason, that if you fix a certain percentage of GDP each year, was 0.7%. Sunak cut it to 0.5. It's now going down to 0.3. If you fix that on an annual basis, then there is a risk of waste, because you're going to get a department potentially trying to find things to throw money at.
But this is a Prime Minister, Matthew, that's run out of ideas. He's run out of ideas. He's clicked on the Reform UK website, had a look at our policies, and it's just stolen. And I fully support this.
I couldn't disagree with you more. I think Starmer has shown leadership here. He's been fleet of foot. And unlike you guys, I couldn't believe it. You might have seen on social media, Lee, when Trump did that outrageous thing last week and called Zelensky a dictator and said that Ukraine had started the war, I mean, the silence from you and your four pals
was
Matthew. Absolutely deafening.
We don't go on Twitter, or X as they call it now, to get clicks like you.
You think Rupert Lowe doesn't go on Twitter to get clicks? He's on Twitter more than I am.
Lots of clicks because he's very, very popular. So we waited 24 hours, we had a long discussion about it. Bear in mind, Nigel was in America at the time, so there was a big time delay. We was talking about it like grown-ups, like adults.
Do you think Zelensky is a dictator?
No, he's not.
And is Putin a dictator?
Yeah, of course he is. Okay. Of course he is. Yeah, we made that quite clear. So the silence you talk about, Matthew, we was discussing this, we was debating it behind closed doors like sensible adults. Your leader and the leader of the opposition were very quick to get out there to get the clicks. We just took a breath.
He's not my leader, he's our leader. He's the Prime Minister of this country.
Got out there and let Nigel make a live statement on GB News, and then we all backed him up.
Why do you need to spend 24 hours behind closed doors to work out whether you think...
Matthew,
let me ask the question, to ask whether Zelensky is a dictator or not.
Listen, I've been in politics quite a while now. I know not to have a knee-jerk reaction to these statements, and I know Trump, like Nigel says, you can listen to what he has to say, but don't always take him literally. And sometimes he changes his mind, like the wind. So you have to wait and just be grown up about it and make a proper statement.
OK, gentlemen, ahead of that expected announcement from the Prime Minister at Downing Street, we can now cut to GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, we're having a bit of a ding-dong back here in the studio. Lee Anderson thinks that this is a direct lift from the Reform Party's website. The policies seem to be mirror images of Nigel Farage's. What are we expecting out there? More to the point, how's this gone down with the political left? Let's face it, this does feel very much like a right-wing policy. Cut foreign aid to boost defence.
Well, yes, but of course the government's first responsibility is the safety of its citizens, and this speaks to that. We've had incredibly clear warnings over the last couple of weeks coming out of Washington, and then at the Munich Security Conference where I was when Europe had a terrible shock, frankly. First of all, that it couldn't necessarily rely on America in the way that it has since the end of the Second World War. And also, the warning from Zelensky saying, don't think this is just about Ukraine because Putin will not stop there. So I think the increase in defence spending was absolutely inevitable. And I'm old enough to remember being in Warsaw not quite a year ago when the previous Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, went and announced that the UK was going to up defence spending to 2.5% by 2030. Now, that was greeted with great fanfare, and then this government's been criticised ever since for not laying out a timetable to get to that. So today, we've seen that clearly by 2027 now, up to 2.5%. That's going to be an extra 13.4 billion a year, and then rising to 3% in the years following that. But of course, Donald Trump has said very clearly that he thinks all of Europe should be spending 5% of their GDP on defence. He says they can afford it. Plenty of European leaders would beg to differ. But the world has changed. The world has changed in the last month since Trump came to power. And, you know, Europe is saying that it's going to step up. I think this is a very clear step in that direction, and worth saying that the US Defence Secretary in the last hour or so has welcomed this move. Pete Hegseth has said it's a strong step from an enduring partner. The question is, when the Prime Minister Keir Starmer gets to Washington on that Thursday for that all-important meeting with Trump, will it put us in Donald Trump's good books?
Hey, Catherine Forster, thank you for joining us there live from Downing Street. Of course, we're crossing back over when the Prime Minister emerges through that famous door behind you very shortly. Catherine Forster, thank you very much. Let's get back to the studio now. Lee Anderson, how much of this do you think is that new sheriff in town, Donald Trump, shooting bullets at Keir Starmer's feet, making him do a tap dance to his tune? Isn't it funny how all this money has never been found in the past, and suddenly they're finding money down the back of the sofa all over the shop?
When you think, Martin, about some of the language the Labour front bench have used over the past few years, and Mayor Khan about Donald Trump, isn't it funny now to see them going over cap in hand to the most powerful man on the planet, and they will dance to his tune, and they have to dance to his tune, because, you know, regardless of what Matthew says about Donald Trump and his language, you know, as far as I can remember, I don't think Biden ever spoke to Putin all the way through the war. You know, Trump's picked the phone up. And when you're going to end a war or bring peace to that region, you've got to speak to the aggressor. And Matthew's right, he is a dictator. But you've got to pick the phone up. You know, if you're going to get peace, speak to both sides, because at the end of the day, there's probably been about 1 million casualties in that war. Ukraine are never going to win that war, we know that. Let's be sensible. Russia's got far too much armaments, they've got far too much power, far too much money. We've got to stop the killing, but we've got to come to an agreement where both sides agree.
OK, can we move on to another topic quickly? As we still await the Prime Minister, I want to get your take on this, Matthew Stadlen. And it was at the Reform Party conference down in Cornwall last night.
Shocking.
Antifa thugs, masked aggressors outside that conference, shouting. We can see footage on screen now. A similar protest. Zara Sultana, now independent, former Labour MP for Coventry South, is planning a similar ragbag bunch to turn up in Birmingham when Reform have their party conference in March. Matthew, is this the kind of politics we really want in Britain? We're always hearing it's the far right that are dangerous. Look at the state of this mob. They're intimidating people on the way into an organised, legitimate, law-abiding political protest. This is the hard left. Are you going to denounce these thugs?
Well, I'm not on the hard left.
No, but as someone from the left, everyone's far right.
I'm answering your question. I would not go on that sort of protest if you paid me $1 million.
Where was you last night, Matthew, at 7 p.m? Because they've all got masks on.
Okay. Let me answer. It's a serious point, actually. There's far too much intimidation of politicians. We've had politicians murdered. I don't care what your politics are. It does not justify political violence. It doesn't justify any form of physical intimidation or indeed verbal intimidation. Lee and I have very serious, robust engagements, debates. I would do the same with Nigel Farage or whoever it was. People I feel do some real damage to our public sphere. But the idea that Lee or anyone else should be intimidated by the mob, that's outrageous. I don't care what your politics are. You don't intimidate people.
Lee, I mean, it is. I spoke with people who were there last night, no doubt you have too, and they do find this really, really shocking. Like, you're big, you're ugly. Now, you can put up with this, but a lot of people who are new to politics might look at this and think, I don't want to get involved in any of this.
Bear in mind, Martin, one of Nigel's security men last night, they're all big bruisers, you know, proper ex-forces. He had 2 teeth knocked out by this rubbish Last night.
Last night?
Last night he had 2 teeth knocked out, that's what I've been told. And it's funny that they've all got masks on, they've all got plenty to say, but they're not prepared to stand up and be counted and be identified. It's about time. Starmer, you know, to his credit, he stopped the riots in the summer. I've said this continuously over the past 7 months. He stopped the riots. He can stop this nonsense.
Look, we should have freedom to protest in this country. Very, very important. Freedom of speech, but you have to obey the law. And intimidating or harassing or threatening in any way of people who are brave enough and good enough to go into politics in this country.
Why is it, Matthew?
To any form of intimidation is unacceptable.
When I was in the Tory party, I can remember one of the last conferences I went to, I think it was in Birmingham, it was like walking the gauntlet going from my
people
hotel.
throwing stuff at Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah, and I was there and I walked through
him.
the mob and I thought, well, you're not going to beat me, I'm going to walk through you, but it's terrifying.
Well, I've called that out in the past.
Hundreds of them. But why is it, Matthew? It's always those on the left that do this.
It's not.
You don't see lots of Tory supporters or Reform supporters or people on the right turning up at Labour conference and throwing and spitting and attacking people. You don't see that,
Lee,
Matthew.
you wouldn't associate yourself with extremists on the
But you
far
don't
right.
associate at the Labour conference.
Please don't expect me to associate myself with the hard or the far left. The hard and the far left dislike me as much as the far right dislike me.
I can understand that, Matthew. I can understand that.
But see, no, this is a serious point. You have to be able to make your arguments.
But why
within
is it
the law.
Why is it it's always those on the left of politics that turn up to these places and demonstrate? They've got the socialist worker boards, whatever, the pro-Palestinian,
You're trying to make political capital out of this. You're trying to make political capital out of it. People who behave in this manner
Labour
have got nothing. They've got nothing to do with. They've got nothing to do with the Labour government. Nothing to do with the Labour government.
I think what it comes down to is something quite simple, and that is whenever there's any political violence or intimidation from the right, people like Keir Starmer are very, very quick to call it out. And in fact, they brought it out and say that everybody who's present at an event...
You're not comparing what happened yesterday to the riots.
Listen,
come on.
Look,
That's disingenuous.
No. If you don't clamp down on this now, I think it's going to get worse. I think it's going to be everywhere. I think these people are going to hound reform around the party.
Let me be clear.
How long do we need to wait before something happens?
As someone on the centre-left, as I would see it on the progressive left, certainly not the hard left or the far left that didn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. Absolutely, all this sort of stuff should be called out.
Have you called it out, Matthew? Have you called it out, Matthew, on social media?
I haven't paid much attention to it yet, but Lee, I've got other things going on, but I'm on national television calling it out now, and people watch GB News, right?
So why have you waited 24 hours to call it out?
Because I haven't seen the exact facts of it. But what I will say is if anyone broke the law yesterday, anyone at all, the full force of the law should come down on them, just as much as it should come down on people on the hard or the far right.
OK, guys, we have to interrupt because, guys, we have to go live to Downing Street. Here's the Prime Minister.
Remember it vividly. It felt as if we were casting off the shackles of history. A continent united by freedom and democracy. If you'd told me then that in my lifetime we would see Russian tanks rolling into European cities again, I would not have believed you. Yet here we are, in a world where everything has changed. Because 3 years ago in Ukraine, that is exactly what happened. Just reflect on that for a second. I think it's worth it. Just imagine you're walking to work, taking your kids to school. Just another February morning like any other. Then suddenly, missiles, sirens, explosions, not in the distance, not on television, in your town, hitting your community, killing your friends, an invading army in your country. Now, the people of Ukraine have woken up to this nightmare for 3 years now. Their courage is inspiring. And Britain can be proud of its response. British families have opened their doors to fleeing Ukrainians. The yellow and light blue flag flies on church halls and churches, the length and breadth of this country. And I will put on record again that I respect the robust response taken by the previous government. I supported it in opposition, and we have built on it in government, taking our support for Ukraine to record levels. But as the nature of that conflict changes, as it has done in recent weeks, it also brings our response into sharper focus. And I believe we must now change our approach to national security so we are ready to meet the challenges of our volatile world. The reason for this is straightforward. Putin's aggression does not stop in Ukraine. Russian spy ships menace our waters. Russian planes enter our airspace. Russian cyber attacks hit our NHS. And just 7 years ago, there was a Russian chemical weapons attack in broad daylight on the streets of Salisbury. We can't hide from this. And I know people have felt the impact of this conflict through rising bills and prices. But unless Ukraine is properly protected from Putin, then Europe will only become more unstable, and that will hurt us even more. Furthermore, the great lesson of our history is that tyrants like Putin only respond to strength. So today I have announced the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will keep our manifesto commitment to spend 2.5% of our GDP on defence. But in light of the grave threats that we face, we will bring forward that target so we meet it in 2027. That is an increase of £13.4 billion year on year compared to where we are today. And we will go further. I have long argued that in the face of ongoing and generational challenges, European countries must do more for their own defence. That is incontrovertible, a completely reasonable point. It is a generational challenge, of course it is, but one we must now take on. So, subject to economic and fiscal conditions, we will also set out a clear ambition for defence spending to rise to 3% of GDP in the next Parliament. Clearly, this is the first and foremost a security imperative. But I also believe that it's a tremendous opportunity. We can use this investment to rebuild Britain's industrial base. The first test of defence policy is always whether it keeps our country safe. But the second should be whether it improves the condition of the British people. Does it help provide the economic security that working people need? Because ultimately, that is fundamental to national security as well. So mark my words, we will make sure this investment maximises British jobs, British growth, British skills and British innovation. And we should be optimistic about the change that it will deliver. Nonetheless, in the short term, this investment can only be funded through hard choices. And so today I've decided that we will fund the initial increase in defence spending by cutting our spending on overseas development, moving from 0.5% of GNI to 0.3%. I want to be clear, that is not an announcement that I'm happy to make. I'm proud of Britain's pioneering record on overseas development, and we will continue to play a key humanitarian role in war-torn countries like Sudan, Ukraine and Gaza, in tackling climate change and supporting international efforts on global health challenges like vaccination. And we will do everything to move towards a world where we can rebuild our development capacity. However, the realities of our dangerous new era mean that the defence and national security of our country must always come first. That is what I campaigned on in the general election. It is what we are delivering today. A new approach on defence, a revival of our industrial base, a deepening of our alliances, the instruments of our national power brought together, creating opportunity, assuring our allies, delivering security for our country. At moments like this in our past, Britain has stood up to be counted. It has come together, and it has demonstrated strength. And that is what the security of this country needs now, and it is what this government will deliver. I will now take questions from the media. I've got Beth from Sky first.
Thank you, Prime Minister. For months you've refused to give a time frame of when you'd hit spending 2.5% of GDP on defence, and now you've accelerated that. Isn't the simple reality that a Trump White House has now bounced you into that acceleration and that decision? And you say this is a generational moment. You reference the Cold War. You sound like a Prime Minister on the war footing. Should viewers be alarmed at how significant this moment is? And what does it really mean for our national security? Thank you.
Well, Beth, this is a significant moment. And that is why we've got to rise this generational challenge. It is a moment where we have to fight for peace through the action that we take. And in relation to your question about the timing, I think in our heart of hearts, we've all known that this decision has been coming for 3 years, since the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine. The last few weeks have accelerated my thinking on when we needed to make this announcement. And I'll be very clear about that, because it is absolutely clear to me now that the decision that, as it were, started life 3 years ago needs to be taken now to rise to the challenge that we have to face. The conflict in Ukraine is about the sovereignty of Ukraine. It's also about security and defence in Europe and our security and defence. And the first duty of government is to ensure that its citizens are secure, and that is why I'm taking that as a matter of duty and responsibility today. Thank you, Beth. Can I go to Carl, ITV?
Thank you, Prime Minister. I mean, the Russians have been in Ukraine for 3 years now. What has changed is the response from the White House. You wouldn't be making this announcement today if you weren't going to see Donald Trump on Thursday, would you? And could I also ask, is he the reason why you've decided to take the money for defence from the aid budget?
Well, on the timing, I do think that this is a decision that's 3 years in the making. I do think that we've known that this decision had to be taken. Of course, the discussions about talks between the parties, a possible peace, what that might mean for European security, the role the UK would have to play in that, has brought our response into sharp focus. I have made a commitment for the safety and security of our country that we will play our full part in any security guarantees if we get that far. And that includes a commitment, if necessary, to use capabilities such as putting our boots on the ground, subject to a US backstop. But it is that context, and in that context, that yes, I have pushed our system to move this date forward, because I think it's vital that we take this decision now, that we rise to the occasion, and we show the leadership that's needed across Europe in response to a very changed context, and that's why I've made this decision today. Thank you. Chris Mason.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Chris Mason, BBC News. Picking up on Carl and Beth's question, what do you say to those people who might think that Donald Trump is now effectively setting UK government policy? And have you done an assessment on the impact of the cutting of the aid budget? Thank you.
I've been arguing for some time in most of the meetings I've been to since I've been Prime Minister for 7 or 8 months now, that European countries, including the United Kingdom, needed to do more for our own collective self-defence and security. So that is not a new argument. Yes, it's true President Trump thinks we should do more, and I agree with him. It chimes with my thinking on this. And by more, I mean more capability, I mean more coordination, and I need more spending. And we have to learn the lessons of the conflict, particularly when it comes to capability and coordination.
The war being fought in Ukraine, I felt this very strongly when I was there a few weeks ago, is being fought now in a very different way to the way it was being fought just 3 years ago. We're seeing firsthand what conflict looks like in Europe in 2025. We have to respond to that for the safety and security of our country. So this is very much my decision based on my assessment of the circumstances that we face as a country. And it is taken first and foremost to ensure that the United Kingdom and its citizens are safe and secure. That is the first duty that I have as Prime Minister. It is my duty, my responsibility, and that is why I have taken this decision today. Thank you. Chris Hope. Chris.
Prime Minister Christopher Hope from GBNews. In July, Reform UK fought the election on a policy to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027 and 3% of GDP after 2030, funded by a £6 billion saving in the aid budget. You said you'll do this similar. You'll increase defence spending to 2.5% by 2027, 3% after 2030, funded by a £6 billion cut in the aid budget. Are you Nigel Farage in disguise?
Nigel Farage didn't even turn up to the debate in Parliament today. Nigel Farage is fawning over Putin. That's not patriotism. That is not what working people need. What I've done is take the duty of Prime Minister seriously, which is to ensure that our citizens are safe and secure, and this decision is made to ensure that they are safe and secure. It is a decision intended to ensure that we fight for the peace that we've enjoyed for the last 80 years, so that for generations to come they can enjoy the freedoms that we have enjoyed. So I've taken this with only one thing in mind, and that is the citizens of this country, for whom I am responsible. Thank you, Chris. Theo, Times Radio.
Theo Usher, Times Radio. Are you concerned, Prime Minister, that come the spending review in the spring, later in the spring, that you've taken this?
Okay, that was Sir Keir Starmer there, addressing the nation at Downing Street, more or less a carbon copy of a speech he gave earlier on in the Commons, and was faced with questions by the media, including our very own chopper. Chris Hope said, "Are you Nigel Farage in disguise?" Let's go live now to Downing Street and speak with Catherine Forster. Catherine, as I said, a carbon copy of a speech delivered earlier on in the Commons. Has to be said, Sir Keir Starmer sounding and looking very ambassadorial, very much like a Prime Minister. What do you take away from that speech today?
Yes, well, he started with basically saying that the world has changed, and it really feels that it has. First of all, 3 years ago, of course, with a European country being invaded by Russia. But more recently, with the arrival of Donald Trump, he's only been president for a month, but my goodness, how things have changed since then. So the PM repeatedly said, you know, the first duty of a government is the safety of its citizens. But it is clear, much as he didn't really want to go there, that this increase has been speeded up by the events of the last month, by the words of Donald Trump and people in his administration. The dawning realization, really, that we can't rely on America for our security, and that we have to get it together ourselves. I thought it was interesting to Chris Hope's question, drawing the parallels between the Reform Manifesto on defence and what the PM has just announced when he said, "Are you Nigel Farage in disguise?" The PM hit back quite punchy, I thought, saying, well, Nigel Farage didn't even turn up for the debate today, and Nigel Farage is falling over Putin. Were his words. So I think all eyes now on what happens when the PM goes to Washington. We saw Emmanuel Macron there yesterday. We saw a bit of the bromance. We also saw Macron, despite all the sort of touchy-feely hand clasping and slaps on the knee, actually fact-checking the American president, saying out loud that he got something wrong. Will Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer feel able to do that? I wouldn't bet on it. Of course, Macron and Trump go back years to the first time that Trump was president. Sir Keir Starmer much newer in the job, so I think he'll be rather more cautious with Trump. Let's see.
Catherine Forster, do you think we're seeing today something which is becoming self-evident, and that is I've had so many generals, so many former army majors, so many chiefs of staff saying we need more money for defence, and never was any money forthcoming, both from the Labour regime and the previous Conservative regime, and suddenly there's a new sheriff in town. He's the one firing bullets at the Prime Minister's feet, and Sir Keir Starmer is doing a merry old dance. It is now Donald Trump who is leading the world. It's Donald Trump who's making prime ministers and presidents dig deep.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. And that was raised several times, wasn't it, in the press conference that we just saw. It is clear that Donald Trump has, it's been a huge wake-up call to Europe. And I remember back in Warsaw last April, I think it was, with Rishi Sunak, when they said they would go to 2.5% by 2030. There was a press conference there, and I asked the then NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg whether Donald Trump wasn't right, that too many NATO countries simply were not paying their way. And Stoltenberg said to me, well, this is something that American presidents have called out for decades. In fact, many presidents before had said it. But the thing is that Donald Trump speaks in a way that he doesn't bother with the diplomatic niceties, does it? He just calls it out as he sees it, very, very directly. But look, there's huge concern in Europe, because we saw that vote in the United Nations yesterday where the US voted with Belarus, with North Korea, with Russia, not calling out Russia for having invaded Ukraine. We are in a really, really different world now. That's why Emmanuel Macron scrambled that emergency summit in Paris straight after Munich. That's why we're seeing all this activity now. The world has changed, and certainly Donald Trump is calling the shots.
Yeah. Catherine Forster, excellent as ever there, live from Downing Street. Thank you very, very much for joining us on GB News. Let's get back to studio now for some reaction to that speech and the questions from the Prime Minister. I'm joined still by Reform UK Party leader, MP for Ashfield, maybe one day, Lee Anderson, and the political commentator Matthew Stadland. Lee, let's first turn to you. I thought Sir Keir Starmer there bristled. He went straight on the offensive about Nigel Farage when he was asked by Chopper, are you Nigel Farage in disguise? He said, well, the Reform Party MPs didn't even bother to turn up to the debate.
Well, I was in the debate today, and it's interesting, Martin, that it says that Nigel's been fawning over Putin. Well, I think, in the coming days we're going to see Sir Keir Starmer fawning over President Trump, cap in hand, with the old begging bowl out. But it's interesting that it says the world's a changing place, and this has been 3 years in the making. Now, let's just remind ourselves, Martin, it's only Reform UK that had this policy in their manifesto at the last election to increase defence spending and cut foreign aid. So we're ahead of the curve. He's done a cut and paste on our policy, and actually he should be thanking Nigel and maybe get Nigel to advise him in the future.
Matthew Stadland.
Yeah, it's a big moment. Real lives are on the line in eastern Ukraine. The sovereignty of Ukraine is up for grabs. Donald Trump picks up the phone to Putin. I agree with Lee, what he said earlier. It is good to speak to Putin, but what's not good is to offer him pretty much everything he wants at the first opportunity for Putin to ask. That's not the answer. That's not the answer to the deal. But he's basically given Putin what he wants. On Nigel Farage, I thought Starmer did come out fighting. I think Starmer is starting to look like a leader. And Farage, your leader, Lee, has said in the past that he admires Putin as a political operator. That is a shameful comment, and it will dog your party and your leader.
Well, it won't, Matthew, at all. I think what you're trying to do is you're misquoting Nigel there when he said that. I think I'm not. I can't remember the quote exactly, but he admired a man who's capable of doing such things.
Imagine saying that of Putin. You would agree that's shameful.
No, give it a rest, mate. He's also said there's a wicked, horrible dictator as well. But you've not quoted
talking
that bit,
with a forked tongue.
You've
then.
not quoted
imagine,
that bit,
would you ever say that? Would you ever say?
You're very selective with your quotes, and you've not called out this violence from last night.
Yes, I have. I've just called it out.
No,
Lee, you're getting rattled. Would you say that Nigel Farage, it was a shameful thing to say that he admired Putin as a political operator or not?
Listen,
that is out of tune with the British public, isn't it?
He's explained this many, many times. You're very selective with your memory.
By saying he liked him as a political operator, which is a disgrace.
You can admire what someone's achieved in their life without agreeing with them.
And you cannot admire Putin for anything.
Them out.
You can't admire Putin for anything. You couldn't admire Hitler or Mussolini for anything.
I admire you, Matthew, to see where you've got to in your life being a political commentator. I don't particularly agree with anything you say.
Putin now, are you? Come on.
You see, look,
this is ridiculous.
Arguments
on the issue now, though, this is a really important moment for Starmer. He looked prime ministerial there. How does he respond to Trump when he's face to face?
Because
it was very impressive. It was very impressive what Macron did. Let me quickly make the point.
He'll do as he's told, like a little lap.
Hang on, let me make the point. Macron was impressive yesterday when he did fact-check Trump to his face. Trump is surrounded by yes men and women and by his pet Elon Musk, or is it the other way around? Good for Macron. But Starmer also has to navigate a tricky path.
Matthew, do you actually think, for 1 nanosecond, and let's be realistic here, do you actually think that people like President Macron and Sir Keir Starmer are going to stand up to Donald Trump and he's even going to listen to a single thing they say? Have not the last couple of weeks shown us that the entire European leadership are immaterial, irrelevant, bit players? This is now the two big dogs, like it or lump it, it's Putin and Trump. Sorted out what Europe could sort out in 3 years.
Do you think it's a good thing if we're a bit part in Europe? Do you think it's a good thing if Putin is the big dog along with Trump?
Stop putting silly words. Stop being ridiculous.
Where is your patriotism?
I want to talk about patriotism.
I'm very patriotic.
What Putin is saying this now is a war between the two big dogs, as you said, which is Putin and Donald Trump.
Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think that's a good thing if it's true?
If it brings peace, then yes, Matthew.
At any cost. So in 2022, would you let me ask you?
If it stops the killing, no, I haven't.
Please let me speak.
Mate. You've had enough speaking today.
Would you have said to Zelensky?
If it stops the killing, then it has to be a good thing.
In 2022, should Zelensky and Ukraine have rolled over? Is that what you do? Is that what you do if Putin rolled into Britain? Right. So why now?
No.
So just to be clear, I'm not saying you're wrong now.
There's a million casualties. The killing has got to stop,
but it was right that they stood up to Putin. It was right they stood up to Putin.
Listen, guys, it has to be one at a time. Guys, listen, the viewers can't hear you if you shout. One at a time. Quick statement to you, and then you've got to write a reply.
To Lee.
Go on.
We all want the killing to stop. The question is at what price? And I'm asking you a very simple question. In 2022, when Putin's tanks rolled in, was Zelensky right, knowing that a lot of people would die, to stand up to Putin and say, you're not going to come into our country and take it over? Was he right?
Oh, absolutely right.
Right.
100%.
So why are you so sure that he should stop now?
Gentlemen, this could carry on until...
Because there's been a million casualties, Matthew. It's a war that Ukraine can never win. We need to stop it and put people first.
Gentlemen, we have to leave it there. This could carry on until Christmas, but we have to call time. Thank you very much, Lee Anderson, Matthew Stadlen, for a heated debate. Let's go back now and speak with GBNews political correspondent at Downing Street, Catherine Forster. Catherine, getting lively in the studio here. Has there been any reaction to this politically? We saw earlier on a lot of the Labour ministers on the front bench, the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, looking absolutely haunted by the fact that there be a cut to foreign aid to pay for this defence increase. It's hardly a left-wing policy. In fact, as we've seen, it's pretty right-wing. It's the policy of Reform UK.
Yes, a lot of long faces on the left today, both in Parliament and elsewhere. Charities too, absolutely horrified. Cast your mind back, it's not that long since foreign aid was 0.7%. Then it was cut to 0.5. The aspiration was always to go back up to 0.7, and now it's been cut further to 0.3 to fund this increase in defence spending. This is not what Labour MPs, those hundreds of new Labour MPs, came into office expecting or wanting to do, much like it's not what they expected or wanting to do, having to maintain that 2-child benefit cap or take winter fuel payment off pensioners or the inheritance tax changes for farmers. The list goes on and on and on. Labour MPs have had a pretty brutal start, really, to being MPs, because a lot of the things that the government is doing, which it says it has absolutely no choice about, are deeply, deeply unpopular on the left.
OK, thank you very, very much, Catherine Forster, for joining us from Downing Street. Let's get back to the studio now, because I'm joined by the Labour MP for Rother Valley, and that's Jake Richards. Jake, welcome to the studio. Thanks for coming. Pleasure to have your company.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. What's your take on the reaction we're seeing across the political spectrum? Not very left-wing. In fact, it's quite a right-wing thing to do. Let's cut foreign aid. Let's spend it on weaponry. Sounds like Nigel Farage. In fact, it is. No. The Reform Party's policy is Sir Keir Starmer, Nigel Farage in disguise.
Absolute nonsense. That this is about a Prime Minister taking up a grown-up decision. We are facing a generational challenge when it comes to security of our country, and the first priority of any Prime Minister, any government, has to be making sure that our country is safe and that we can defend ourselves. And the decision made today will go some way to doing that. And it's, I was in the House of Commons to see the Prime Minister's statement, and there was agreement across the House from Conservative MPs, from Reform MPs, from Liberal Democrat MPs. This is a time where the country needs to come together, and I'm pleased the Prime Minister is showing that leadership and taking us forward.
Jake Richards, a lot of people in that press conference were asking a question I'm about to ask you now. This is something that Sir Keir Starmer wanted to do. It's not something that Sir Keir Starmer could particularly afford to do. You keep talking about the £22 billion black hole. It's something that Sir Keir Starmer has had to do. He's about to meet with Donald Trump, who wants 5%. Is this an early example of Sir Keir Starmer dancing to the tune of Donald Trump?
No, it's about showing leadership in a world which is increasingly dangerous, increasingly unstable, and it's time that Britain is able to defend itself. And that's why the Prime Minister has taken a step. Really difficult decisions. You're right, it's not easy. There isn't a lot of money to go around, and we've had to make difficult decisions to prioritise national security, which should always be the absolute first priority of any government. And that's why the Prime Minister's taken the action that he's announced today.
Are you expecting any pushback on the cuts to foreign aid? We've already seen charities piping up about this. That will no doubt intensify over coming days. If foreign aid is being cut, charities will be missing out. They'll be banging a drum to your door saying, hang on a minute, we're meant to be spreading soft power, we're meant to be a force for good. It's not a Labour Party position to be cutting this foreign aid.
I'm totally unapologetic about the decision that the government has made by prioritising defence spending over foreign aid. And you've characterised this as not left-wing. Well, by the way, Labour Party were the party that took this country into NATO, helped create NATO. The Labour Party have played a pivotal role in European security since the end of the Second World War. That's one of the reasons why I'm a Labour Party member. I will always support our armed services. I will always ensure that our country stands tall on the world stage. And that is a progressive left-wing position, and it's a Labour position, and one that I'm proud to support today.
But there will be, there will be inexorable criticism from people on the political left who will say, hang on a minute, you are selling away countries in the third world that rely on Britain for that soft power, for that foreign aid, in countries like Sudan. They will be complaining like Billy O, and well, you know it.
Well, look, there's always people complaining. There's always people complaining. Leadership is about taking tough decisions. You're going to have to break eggs to make an omelette. There is nothing more important than national security. I keep repeating it. So I am not going to apologise at all if this decision upsets a few people on the fringes of the Labour Party. What's much, much more important is that we can stand tall as a country, that we can defend ourselves, and that we are able to bring about peace in Europe. That has to be the priority, and I'm pleased that the Prime Minister's grasped that.
Do you think politically this will help to curry some favour with Donald Trump? We've seen in the past, for example, a lot of people in your cabinet have been very outspoken about Donald Trump, calling him a white supremacist, calling him a fascist, calling him a racist, a misogynist. David Lammy turned up on the streets of London to protest against his visit when he came to see when he came over and when Sadiq Khan was in power. A lot of humble pie is going to be eaten in Washington, D.C. this week. Is this a way of trying to, undo some of the bad vibes of the past?
Well, I was in the House of Commons today when the Prime Minister made a statement, and right at the start he made it very clear that the special relationship between the United States and our country has not only be maintained, but it has to develop and improve. Donald Trump is the president. He set out his position. We need to meet with him. That doesn't mean we agree to everything he says. That doesn't mean that we bend over for him, but we absolutely have to engage with where he is on this. And I think that's, again, shows mature, sensible, common sense approach. And the Prime Minister will go to Washington with the full support of the House, and I hope the country, in getting what we need as a country to defend ourselves and to secure peace in Europe.
Now, Sir Keir Starmer, very quickly if we could, has been adamant that Ukraine should surrender no territory. It's probably likely that's going to happen under this deal with Putin and Donald Trump directly. What will Sir Keir Starmer say then? Will he once again sacrifice his principles to keep Donald Trump happy?
Well, come on, look, the key priority of this is that Ukraine have to be on the negotiating table. And again, I think there is unanimous, people agree on that across the political spectrum. They have to be in the room. They have to be part of any negotiation on any a peaceful conclusion to the end of the war. And we want that. We want end to the war, but it has to be done with Ukraine in the room.
Thank you very much for joining us, Jake Richards, of course, the MP for Rother Valley for the Labour Party. Excellent guest. Please come back. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, if you search some winter sun this summer, then here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
If you're heading away for some winter sun through this week, there will be some fine weather around across parts of the Mediterranean, but currently around the eastern Med it's still fairly unsettled. Some heavy rain, some strong winds and temperatures well below average for the time of year, but these are gradually going to be lifting. Further west, a drier story across many parts of, well, France and Spain, but there is some wet weather starting to push its way in as we go later on this week. Otherwise, some decent sunshine on offer. See you later.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Eventually we'll see daytime showers easing overnight, but that means clear skies, so turning chilly. We're likely to see a frost, but a different story in the west, turning wet and windy as this next frontal system starts to push its way eastwards, and we will start to see some showers continue for a time, particularly across the far northwest, where once again the odd shower may be heavy, but elsewhere these largely easing away, leaving a dry night. But that means plenty of clear skies, particularly across eastern areas. Those temperatures soon dipping away and likely to see a frost, particularly across the northeast of Scotland, but turning very wet and windy across parts of Northern Ireland, Wales, parts of Devon and Cornwall. We could actually see some quite heavy downpours by the time we reach the morning. So a wet start across parts of the southwest, parts of Wales, eventually moving into central areas and parts of the southeast through the morning. Some heavy downpours and turning quite blustery for a time too. Starting to turn quite wet across Northern Ireland, northwestern parts of England and Scotland too. Outbreaks of rain here, perhaps even seeing some snow skirt its way across the Pennines. This mainly confined to hills, but a brighter start across the far north and northeastern part of Scotland, but chilly, likely seeing some frost. And it's here where we'll see the brightest of the conditions. Any rain elsewhere slowly shifting its way eastwards, still heavy and persistent at times, turning a little bit brighter once this clears through, but still plenty of showers behind it, once again with a risk of hail and possibly some thunder. The driest of the weather across the far north of Scotland, and temperatures will be a slight touch down compared to what they were today, highs only reaching around 6 to 7 Celsius across Scotland. Through into the evening, any rain eventually clearing away. Still plenty of blustery showers, though, to start off the evening. And then eventually, as high pressure builds, these showers will ease away, leading to a largely dry night. And staying largely dry for the rest of the week and beginning of the weekend. Away from the far northwest, though, will eventually once again turn wet and windy.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 10 to 6 now. Earlier on today, Steve Reed apologised personally to my next guest, farmer David Passmore, whose 90-year-old mother is wishing her life away over the inheritance tax changes. Let's take a listen.
Many people are caught up in the middle of this inheritance tax change. This includes my mother, an active farmer of 90 from a family of over 400 years of continuous farming labours and a widow of over 20 years now wishing her life away ahead of April next year. Her and countless other widows and widowers are now in a similar position where the best tax advice is to ensure they are not here by April next year. What do you say to her?
Well, first of all, I'm really sorry about the individual circumstances. Genuinely and truly, I'm very, very sorry to hear that. But it's very difficult for me as Secretary of State to comment on individual circumstances. I can't do that. But I've explained to you why we had to take a decision that I know has been very, very difficult. But we will focus in the future on making farmers more profitable.
Well, it's every politician's worst nightmare. And the man who asked that question, David Passmore, joins me now. How do you think Steve Reid responded there?
Very poorly. He said, I'm not responding to a personal question. It actually was a question on behalf of countless widows, widowers, people caught up in this terrible and inhumane policy. And he didn't know how to answer it. And at the end of the day, he effectively said, we've got a black hole to fill. And if what could be quite a considerable number of people choose to take their own lives, that's just collateral damage, which is, to me, appalling tax policy. He didn't really have an answer. You can tell by the feeling in the conference hall he didn't answer the question. So, yeah, complete lack of compassion or empathy. That the changes have caught this group of people out, people who are in their 80s and 90s have taken the best tax advice, followed his word from, he said before, we won't tinker with this tax, so they've stayed in this position. And, yeah, it's absolutely dreadful, and he didn't have an answer to it. And, yeah, it was a lack of compassion or empathy to these people caught in this terrible position.
And there was an audible groan in the room there, David Passmore. I'm not able to comment on individual circumstances, but this brings into sharp relief the fact that these policy changes have a human impact, a huge human impact.
Yes, you've got a huge amount of people that the central element I was bringing, it wasn't my mother, it was an example of thousands of people like that who are at home, the ones we don't hear of, who are sat at home wishing their lives away, and sadly some of them will take their lives, and that is, to me, an unacceptable tax policy, government policy, and he had no answer to that. He just seemed to think it was just friendly fire from this policy, and that is dreadful.
OK, David Passmore, thank you very much for joining us in the studio today to share your story. Thank you very, very much indeed. That's all from me today, but don't worry, because up next, it's Jubes & Co., the fiercest debate show in town. And then Nigel Farage is back, 7 p.m. It's Farage. But now it's time for your weather with Honor Critic, and I'll see you tomorrow at 3.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Eventually we'll see daytime showers easing overnight, but that means clear skies, so turning chilly, we're likely to see a frost. But a different story in the west, turning wet and windy as this next frontal system starts to push its way eastwards. And we will start to see some showers continue for a time, particularly across the far northwest, where once again the odd shower may be heavy. But elsewhere, these largely easing away, leaving a dry night. But that means plenty of clear skies, particularly across eastern areas. So temperatures soon dipping away and likely to see a frost, particularly across the northeast of Scotland, but turning very wet and windy across parts of Northern Ireland, Wales, parts of Devon and Cornwall. We could actually see some quite heavy downpours by the time we reach the morning. So a wet start across parts of the southwest, parts of Wales, eventually moving into central areas and parts of the southeast through the morning. Some heavy downpours and turning quite blustery for a time too. Starting to turn quite wet across Northern Ireland, northwestern parts of England and Scotland too. Outbreaks of rain here, perhaps even seeing some snow skirt its way across the Pennines. This mainly confined to hills, but a brighter start across the far north and northeastern part of Scotland. But chilly, likely seeing some frost. And it's here where we'll see the the brightest of the conditions. Any rain elsewhere slowly shifting its way eastwards, still heavy and persistent at times, turning a little bit brighter once this clears through, but still plenty of showers behind it, once again with a risk of hail and possibly some thunder. The driest of the weather across the far north of Scotland, and temperatures will be a slight touch down compared to what they were today, highs only reaching around 6 to 7 Celsius across Scotland. Through into the evening, any rain eventually clearing away. Still plenty of blustery showers, though, to start off the evening, and then eventually as high pressure builds, these showers will ease away, leading to a largely dry night and staying largely dry for the rest of the week and beginning of the weekend. Away from the far northwest, though, will eventually once again turn wet and windy.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are long queues heading towards Glasgow on the M8 this evening, heading over the Kingston Bridge, where a lorry's broken down right on the bridge, where it's down to a single lane on the main carriageway. The two dedicated fast slip roads that take you up towards the exit for the A484 are fully open, I can see on camera, but it's queuing back onto the M77. On the M6 in Cheshire, the inside lane's closed southbound, junction 21A to 21. It's just to the south of the M62, where a car and a lorry have collided. In the West Midlands, north of West Bromwich at Stone Cross, the Walsall Road, that's closed. Emergency services are dealing with an incident. South London and Mitcham, the A236, the Western Road block westbound off Holborn Way due to emergency repairs. And on the M5 in Somerset, a lane's closed northbound from junction 23 to 22, just north of Bridgewater. Emergency repairs are underway. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive?